Chapter 221. What happened in the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion did not affect Chu Xiu's mood. Although he had offended Jiang Wenyuan, he was not worried that Jiang Wenyuan would do anything to him here. After all, Chu Xiu represented the Guanzhong torture room. If Jiang Wenyuan attacked him, it was equivalent to attacking the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, Jiang Wenyuan wouldn't touch Chu Xiu even if it was for his own sake. In front of outsiders, Jiang Wenyuan had always shown himself to be very forthright and magnanimous. Right now, others still didn't know that he had been rejected when he tried to recruit Chu Xiu. If he were to make a move on Chu Xiu at this time, wouldn't it be equivalent to confessing without being pressed and ruining his own reputation? Therefore, Chu Xiu continued to wander around the Ji State Prefecture for the past few days. At the same time, many people from the pugilistic world came to the Ji State Prefecture during this period of time. The entire Ji State Prefecture was in a mess, and it was almost impossible to contain them. Chu Xiu could not be bothered to squeeze with those people in the Ji Province Prefecture, so he went directly to the Water Cloud Temple next to the Mirror Lake outside the city. On one side of the Mirror Lake was the Mo family's Mirror Lake Villa, and on the other side was a small Taoist temple called the Water Cloud Temple. In the Mirror Lake, Chu Xiu sat on a small boat, looking at the scenery outside. There was a pot of yellow wine and a few side dishes on the bow. If it was not the wretched Li Busan beside him, but a gentle and affectionate beauty, this scene would probably be more poetic. At this time, there were many small boats on the Mirror Lake. Obviously, there were many warriors who thought that the Ji State Prefecture was too crowded, so they came here to relax. Anyway, it was not too far away from the God Weapon Convention of the Mirror Lake Villa. At this time, Li Busan was introducing the situation of the Water Cloud Temple to Chu Xiu. Young master, in 2 hours, Taoist Xiancheng of the Water Cloud Temple will be preaching. If you are interested, you can go and listen. Chu Xiu took a sip of the warm yellow wine and asked, "Is this Water Cloud Temple's Taoist Xiancheng very strong?" Li Busan scratched his head and said hesitantly, "Taoist priest Xiancheng? He doesn't seem to know any martial arts. At least, in all the years I've been in the Ji State Prefecture, I've never seen Taoist priest Xiancheng fight with anyone. At most, I've seen him perform some Taoist Qi nurturing moves, but they're slow and powerless. Moreover, the scale of the Water Cloud Temple is also very small. There are only Taoist priest Xiancheng and a few orphans that he took in when they were young. These orphans were raised by him to become little Taoist priests. After they came of age, they went to the Jianghu to preach and travel." When Chu Xiu heard this, a look of interest appeared in his eyes. He didn't believe that the Taoist priest of the Water Cloud Temple didn't know martial arts. One had to know that the Mirror Lake was a treasured land of feng shui. However, in this huge Mirror Lake, on one side was the Mirror Lake Manor's Mo clan, and on the other side was the Water Cloud Monastery. Wasn't this strange? It was normal for the Mo clan to be there. Although the Mo clan wasn't very strong, they had Mo Yezi, the former pavilion master of the Divine Weapon Pavilion, and a great master of blacksmithing. Ordinary powers couldn't compare to them. Therefore, it was normal that other powers didn't dare to establish their power next to the Mirror Lake. Moreover, the Water Cloud Temple looked very ordinary. There was only an old Taoist priest and a group of young Taoist priests. However, it was able to face the Mirror Lake Manor's Mo clan across the lake. If there was nothing fishy going on, Chu Xiu wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Li Busan continued. Every time after lunch, Taoist priest Xiancheng would explain the Taoist scriptures to the young Taoist priests in front of the Water Cloud Temple. Anyone who is interested can come and watch. The things that ordinary Taoist priests talked about were so profound that they gave me a headache just by looking at them. However, Taoist priest Xiancheng was able to use the simplest context to explain those things. Even a rough person like me could understand them. I don't know why, but every time I listen to Taoist priest Xiancheng talk about these things, I always feel like I've thought of something. It's very strange. Therefore, whenever I have time, I will come and listen to Taoist priest Xiancheng's teachings. There are also many martial artists in the Ji State Prefecture who come to listen to Taoist priest Xiancheng's teachings. Taoist priest Xiancheng doesn't hide anything. No matter how many people listen, he always says what he wants to say. After hearing Li Busan's description, Chu Xiu became interested in Taoist priest Xian Cheng of the Water Cloud Temple. He wanted to see if this Taoist priest was a hidden expert. If this Taoist priest Xian Cheng was really an expert, and Li Busan, who had known him for more than 10 years, could not detect his strength, then it proved that Taoist priest Xian Cheng had successfully hidden himself from the world. At this moment, a luxurious passenger ship made a splash and sailed to the side of Chu Xiu's boat. A voice chuckled and said, "It seems that Brother Chu is in a good mood. I wonder how the style of our Eastern Qi is. Is it comparable to the style of Guangzhong?" A figure dressed in a golden brocade robe leaped down from the passenger ship, and an almost undetectable sound of Gang Qi rang out from beneath his feet. He was easily dragged onto Chu Xiu's small boat. Chu Xiu remembered this person in front of him. A few days ago, he was on the 7th floor of the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. Judging from his status and the fact that he was surrounded by a crowd, he should not be of low status. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Guangzhong has experienced war, and there is really nothing beautiful about the scenery. The so-called prosperity is only due to the trade caravans and martial artists coming and going from the 3 countries. In reality, there are not many locals in Guangzhong." After saying this, Chu Xiu cupped his hands at the young man and said, "May I know your name?" The young man smiled and said, "Not a problem. I am Mo Tianlin of the Mo family of Shangyang." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Number 15 on the Longhu roll. Ink drunk sword, Mo Tianlin?" The Mo family of Shangyang of Eastern Qi was one of the 9 aristocratic families in the world. Although it was not at the top, it had not declined for 1,000 years, and its strength had always been stable. Mo Tianlin shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I did not think of this nickname myself. It is not something to be proud of." The nickname Ink Drunk Sword did not refer to Mo Tianlin's martial arts or his weapon. Instead, it referred to the time when Mo Tianlin was young and frivolous. He hid his identity and pursued a prostitute but failed. In his drunken stupor, he danced with his sword and used it as a brush. He splashed ink and wrote a sad song that spread throughout the entire Eastern Qi. As a disciple of the Mo family of Shangyang, one of the 9 aristocratic families, he pursued a prostitute but failed. As a disciple of a martial arts family, he wanted to make a name for himself in Eastern Qi with a song. This was really embarrassing. Mo Tianlin was beaten up by his father and locked in the ancestral hall for 2 years. But who would have thought that Mo Tianlin would suddenly become enlightened because of this incident? His cultivation improved rapidly, and he went from the blood condensation stage to the physical invulnerability stage in 2 years. After he came out to roam the Jianghu, he showed extraordinary strength and climbed to the 15th place on the Longhu list within a year. But when Mo Tianlin became famous, someone revealed the frivolous things he did in his youth. As a result, Mo Tianlin's nickname became Ink Drunk Sword. It sounded poetic, but in fact, it was the most humiliating moment for Mo Tianlin. Chu Xiu did not know about these past events. But if people around him who were familiar with his past also called him by this nickname, Mo Tianlin would turn hostile. Chu Xiu really did not know about the frivolous past of Mo Tianlin. He only remembered the names and backgrounds of the top 20 martial artists on the Longhu list, but he would not memorize all their detailed information. At this moment, Mo Tianlin smiled and said, "Brother Chu and Prince Anil seemed to have some conflict yesterday. Today, he took the initiative to talk to Chu Xiu because he was overflowing with gossip and purely out of curiosity. It was fine that he did not see Chu Xiu. Coincidentally, he was also touring the lake, so he came to chat with Chu Xiu. He was also a little curious about Chu Xiu. Among the top 20 of the Longhu list, there were very few martial artists who were originally loose cultivators. It could be said that they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Although Chu Xiu was now the patrol inspector of the Guangzhong torture room, his background was that of a standard loose cultivator. Being able to reach this step, Mo Tianlin was also very curious. Chu Xiu shook his head. He did not spread the news of Jiang Wenyuan recruiting him to the city. He only said lightly, "Just some differences of opinion. I, Chu Xiu, was born in the wilderness, while Prince Anil was once a member of the royal family. Of course, we are not on the same page." Hearing that Chu Xiu did not want to say anything, Mo Tianlin did not force him. Instead he said, "Actually, Prince Anil falling out with you could be your own bad luck, taking the blame for your hall master." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Hall Master Guan has a grudge with Prince Anil." Mo Tianlin smiled and said, "My Mo family is the local tyrant of Eastern Qi. I have heard some news. It is said that when Hall Master Guan Siyu came to Eastern Qi to meet the royal family to discuss the status of the Guanzhong torture room, Prince Anil had contact with Hall Master Guan, but for some reason, they parted on bad terms." Chu Xiu's eyes immediately revealed a strange expression when he heard that. If he guessed correctly, Jiang Wenyuan should have tried to recruit Guan Siyu just like how he had done in the past. If this was the case, he didn't know how to evaluate Jiang Wenyuan anymore. This was simply ridiculous. At that time, it was more than 20 years ago. Guan Siyu had already taken over the position of the Guanzhong torture room's hall master. She was also a martial arts grand master of the real pellet state. She was definitely an overlord-level character. And what about Jiang Wenyuan at that time? Even with the identity of Prince Anil, he was just a junior. The newborn calf was not afraid of the tiger. He actually wanted to recruit Guan Siyu and the entire Guanzhong torture room. If it was Chu Xiu, he would probably turn hostile. Chu Xiu shook his head and smiled faintly. "Whether Prince Anil has a grudge with Hall Master Guan or with me, I will return to Guanzhong after the Divine Weapon Convention anyway. Why do I care so much?" Speaking of which, the people who came to the Divine Weapon Convention this time are much fewer than I thought. I didn't even see the top 5 of the Longhu list. Mo Tianlin smiled and said, "In our opinion, a divine weapon is something that can only be encountered by chance. Even my Mo family's old ancestor doesn't have a divine weapon in his hands. But for the top 5 of the Longhu list, as long as they really grow up and step into the realm of martial arts grandmaster, the sect will naturally prepare a divine weapon for them. Why bother to come here to fight for a divine weapon that you don't even know what it is?" Chapter 222. Not only did the martial artists from the major sects and aristocratic families have a much higher starting line than those who were born in the wilderness, they also had access to unimaginable resources in the future. This was how important one's background was, and how unfair the heavens were. But this was the way of the world, and no one could do anything about it. Chu Xiu looked at Mo Tianlin and said, "Brother Mo, are you envious of those people?" Mo Tianlin smiled bitterly and said, "Of course I'm envious. It would be a lie to say that I'm not envious. Although my Mo family is one of the 9 great aristocratic families, our ranking is neither high nor low. We know our own strength very well. For example, that little celestial master, Zhang Qingjin, was born with everything he had. The position of the next celestial master is destined to be his. Also, the 10th place in the famous sword spectrum, one of the 3 divine weapons of Mount Longhu, the evil slaying sword, will also be wielded by Zhang Qingjin in the future. But for people like us, we have to scheme against each other within our families and fight with people in the Jianghu to obtain all of this. But for others, it's so easy." Chu Xiu poured a cup of wine for Mo Tianlin and said lightly, "Actually, Brother Mo, you don't have to compare yourself with people like Zhang Qingjin. As a disciple of the Mo family, Brother Mo already has a lot. At the very least, you have the qualifications to fight with these heroes in the Jianghu. What you don't know is that for most low-level martial artists, staying alive is already doing their best." Chu Xiu's words made Mo Tianlin's whole body tremble. Doing their best to stay alive was indeed not something someone with his background could imagine. Mo Tianlin smiled freely and shook his head. "Listening to Brother Chu's words, it seems like I'm being unreasonable. Compared to the majority of martial artists who cultivate alone, martial artists like me who come from sects and aristocratic families are indeed much better." Just as Mo Tianlin was chatting with Chu Xiu, a burst of exclamations suddenly came from the surrounding boats. Chu Xiu looked in the direction of the sound, and saw a person walking over from the lake. That person was a handsome young man in his 20s. He wore a gray warrior suit, and his long black hair hung loosely behind him. He didn't wear a crown, and looked free and unrestrained. Moreover, he carried a long sword wrapped in linen on his back without a scabbard, which looked a little strange. At this moment, the young man was walking on the water. Every time his feet landed on the water, there would be an explosion of astral energy. It was as if a physical body had exploded, causing his body to soar into the air. Only then could he run on the water. Walking on water sounded simple, and any martial artist who had reached the physical invulnerability realm should be able to do it. However, in reality, it was rare to find someone who had reached the oneness of heaven and man realm, let alone a physical invulnerability expert. Continuously exploding the stellar energy under one's feet to achieve the goal of supporting oneself. This required not only the cultivation of the martial artist's own inner strength, but also the control of the stellar energy. Seeing this person coming, the corner of Mo Tianlin's mouth immediately revealed a smile. Another acquaintance. As he spoke, the young man had already arrived in front of Chu Xiu's boat. With one step, he came directly in front of Chu Xiu and Mo Tianlin. Mo Tianlin, I haven't seen you for more than a year, but you're still the same. Mo Tianlin smiled. Just as he was about to say some polite words, he heard the young man continue. Your strength still hasn't improved at all. The greeting he was about to say was immediately swallowed back by Mo Tianlin. He coldly snorted. Xia Xiaolu, your mouth is still so smelly. After rebuking him, Mo Tianlin then introduced him to Chu Xiu. This is Hundredly Flying Feather Xia Xiaolu, from West Chu's World Alliance. Chu Xiu looked at him. This person was also an outstanding talent on the Longhu list. His ranking was even higher than Mo Tianlin's, 12th. Moreover, his background was also extraordinary. He came from the World Alliance of the Six Gangs. His master was the famous World Alliance's leader, Thousand Li of Mountains and Rivers Chunqing Di. That person was an outstanding talent. Like Nie Renlong from the morgue, he also came from the wilderness. If Nie Renlong relied on his own methods to slowly build up the foundation of the morgue, then Chunqing Di used his own pair of iron fists to build up the World Alliance's Thousand Li of Mountains and Rivers. Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, So it's Brother Xia, I've heard a lot about you. Mo Tianlin then pointed at Chu Xiu and said, This is Brother Chu Xiu. In the past he was the gold medal assassin Blood Demon of the Blue Dragon Society. Now he is the Guanxi Patrol Inspector of the Guanzhong Torture Room. He is also ranked in the top 20 of the Longhu list. Although Chu Xiu was ranked in the top 20 of the Longhu list, his fame was mostly in the northern Yan-East Yan region. In the entire Jianghu, he wasn't very famous. Even if most people didn't look at the Longhu list, they wouldn't even remember Chu Xiu's name. Therefore, Mo Tianlin introduced him in detail, afraid that Xia Xiaolu wouldn't know Chu Xiu. However, after hearing Chu Xiu's name, Xia Xiaolu suddenly said, You're that Chu Xiu who beat up that brat Lin Kaiyun to the point where not a single part of his body is left unscathed? Also, little Marquis Lu Fengxian, are you your friend? Chu Xiu shrugged and said, I don't know if Lin Kaiyun suffered a blow or not, but when he caused trouble in the Guanzhong torture room, I fought with him and defeated him. I don't know what happened to him after he returned to Sword King City. Lu Fengxian is indeed this one's friend. Brother Xia, did you meet him in the West Chu land? I wonder how Brother Lu is doing? On the side, Mo Tianlin looked at Chu Xiu, blinked, and said, Brother Chu, it seems like you've hidden yourself quite well. Even Wind-Sweeping Pavilion's intelligence doesn't have this information. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, If I announced it to the world just because I defeated Lin Kaiyun, wouldn't Sword King City's people come after me? Xia Xiaolu's cold face pulled out a smile and said, Even if you don't announce it, Sword King City's people will still hate you in their hearts. I've long been unhappy with that kid Lin Kaiyun. I was waiting for him to come out of seclusion to teach him a lesson. I didn't expect that when I ran into Sword King City's people, I heard that Lin Kaiyun was defeated by you and was unable to recover. He's been muddling around in Sword King City all day, and is almost crippled. Chu Xiu rubbed his nose. If this was the case, then Chu Xiu was really wrong this time. Last time in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu really didn't have any killing intent towards Lin Kaiyun. He just wanted to teach him a lesson. Lin Kaiyun's injuries weren't fatal. But who would have thought that Lin Kaiyun's state of mind would be so poor? He suffered such a small blow and almost died. This was equivalent to Chu Xiu crippling one of Sword King City's younger generation's geniuses. This enmity wasn't small. Chu Xiu hadn't expected this. Xie Xiaolu said to Chu Xiu, "Actually, I already knew about you before this matter. I got to know Lu Fengxian more than a year ago. He's also an outstanding talent. If it wasn't for him not wanting to cause trouble, with Brother Lu's strength he would definitely be ranked on the Dragon and Tiger list. Even my master wanted to recruit Brother Lu after meeting him. Unfortunately, Brother Lu refused and went back to roaming the world. At that time, Brother Lu mentioned Brother Chu to me. For Brother Lu to praise you so much, you're definitely not an ordinary person." When talking about Lu Fengxian, Xie Xiaolu's face, which didn't have much expression, revealed a look of admiration. Obviously, he admired Lu Fengxian very much. This was very normal in Chu Xiu's eyes. He understood Lu Fengxian's character. He could make many friends, but at the same time, he was also the easiest to be used by others. And in terms of strength, Lu Fengxian didn't need to be mentioned. His future achievements could already explain everything. At this time, Mo Tianlin suddenly asked Xie Xiaolu, "Right, why did you come to the God Weapon Convention this time? Not to mention the fact that you might not be able to obtain the God Weapon. Even if you did obtain the God Weapon, that God Weapon would be a blade. But are you willing to give up the floating feather blade that you've been cultivating since you were a child? And that you've already cultivated it to the point of cultivating your life and death?" Xie Xiaolu lightly said, "I'm just here to join in the fun. After being in closed-door cultivation in West Chu for so long, it's so boring that it's about to rust. I came out to relax and see if there's anyone I don't like that I can teach a lesson to." Hearing this, Chu Xiu and Mo Tianlin were a bit speechless. This reason was a bit too strong. Moreover, Chu Xiu had a very interesting discovery. Xie Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin had completely different personalities, but the two of them could become good friends. This was very interesting. Mo Tianlin's personality was cool and indifferent. He also had the courtesy and self-restraint of someone from a large family. He had a sense of propriety when doing things. Although you wouldn't like this kind of person at first sight, at least you wouldn't hate them. On the other hand, Xie Xiaolu was the opposite. He was cold and indifferent, his words were stinky and hard, and his temper was a bit strange. For people he liked, like Lu Fengxian, even if the other party's background and ranking on the Dragon and Tiger list couldn't compare to his, he would still admire them. On the other hand, if it was someone he disliked, like Lin Kaiyun, even if Chu Xiu didn't make a move against Lin Kaiyun, Xie Xiaolu was prepared to teach the other party a lesson. For two people with this kind of personality to become good friends, other than fate, there was also the fact that their families were far apart. In the world of martial arts, people couldn't help themselves. Sometimes you couldn't even choose your friends or lovers. The Shangyang Mo family was in Eastern Qi and the Heaven Alliance was in West Chu. They were separated by tens of thousands of miles. Not to mention conflict, they didn't even have any business dealings. That's why Xie Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin didn't have any interest in each other. "That's right, Brother Chu. Where are you planning to go in a bit?" Mo Tianlin asked. Chu Xiu pointed at the Water Cloud Temple and said, "I heard that the Water Cloud Temple's Taoist priest Xiancheng is very skilled. I'm going to listen to his teachings." Mo Tianlin muttered in confusion. "Water Cloud Temple's Taoist priest Xiancheng? I've never heard of any Taoist masters nearby." Just as he said this, Mo Tianlin suddenly remembered something his father seemed to have told him. So Mo Tianlin quickly changed his mind and said, "All right, let's go to the Water Cloud Temple for a stroll. We can take a break there." Chapter 223. The boat rowed towards the Water Cloud Temple on the other side of Mirror Lake. Chu Xiu and the other two sat at the bow, drinking and chatting, while Li Busan rowed at the stern. But at this time he did not have the slightest complaint, and was even ecstatic in his heart. He was just an ancient martial art practitioner at the bottom of the Ji State Prefecture, but now he could row a boat for 3 outstanding individuals ranked on the Longhu list. This was a great qualification. After the God Weapon Convention, this would be enough for him to brag about for 3 years. After reaching the other side, Chu Xiu found that the Water Cloud Temple was really a small temple, with only a Taoist temple and a few guest rooms. There was a row of pavilions outside the Water Cloud Temple, specially prepared for people who came to Mirror Lake for a walk to rest. At this time, there were hundreds of cultivators gathered around the pavilion. There were loose cultivators and cultivators from various aristocratic families. When they saw the three of them, they immediately started discussing among themselves. However, they could not help but step aside, giving the best position in the center to the three of them. Mo Tianlin was the local snake of Eastern Qi, and nearly half of the people here were from Eastern Qi. Seeing Mo Tianlin come, they naturally gave him face. Some of the West Chu cultivators were also greeting Xie Xiaolu. It was clear that they knew this famous tiger and dragon list elite. Chu Xiu was the least famous one here. Not many people knew him, only a few people from northern Yin knew Chu Xiu. And among them was Chu Xiu's acquaintance Bai Wuji. Seeing Chu Xiu come, Bai Wuji coldly snorted. Since when did this Chu Xiu hang out with Mo Tianlin and Xie Xiaolu? Although he was a little unhappy with Chu Xiu, the God Weapon Conference was about to start. He did not want to waste his energy here, so he just coldly snorted at Chu Xiu and did not speak. On the other side, Xie Xiaolu saw Bai Wuji's expression and whispered to Chu Xiu, "Is there a grudge?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "He is the one who has enmity with me, not the other way around. Previously, I had a few conflicts with him in the northern drifting snow city. After that, because Wind Sweeping Tower ranked me above Bai Wuji on the Longhu leaderboard, he felt that it was unfair in his heart. A few days ago, he even caused trouble for me at the Dragon Assembling Pavilion. Brother Mo saw it." When Mo Tianlin heard this, he shook his head and said, "Bai Wuji cares too much about fame and fortune. Strength isn't something that Wind Sweeping Tower can decide, it's something that we have to fight for." Zhang Qingjin had been number one on the Tiger and Dragon roll for more than 10 years. Even if Wind Sweeping Tower said that he was not number one, who would believe it? If you, Bai Wuji, had the ability, even if Wind Sweeping Tower ranked you last, the people of the Jianghu would not agree. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Unfortunately, in the Jianghu, fame and fortune are the most difficult things to let go of. However, whether Bai Wuji can let go of it or not is none of my business, as long as he doesn't provoke me." Everyone sat in the pavilion for a while. Then an old Taoist priest in his 60s walked out of the Water Cloud Temple. His gray robe was very clean, and his hair was not gray at all. His spirit qi and spirit were very good. Chu Xiu let out a soft cry of surprise. He sensed a very strange feeling from the old Taoist priest. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but if he had to forcibly describe it, the word natural would be more suitable. That's right, it wasn't the aura of a martial artist, but a natural feeling. Seeing Taoist Master Xiancheng come out, some of the loose cultivators present bowed to him and greeted him. Their attitudes were extremely courteous. These rogue cultivators did not have a master to guide them in their cultivation. In the past, they had to rely on themselves to comprehend the Tao. Often, they would be stuck at a bottleneck for a long time. No one knew who happened to pass by the Water Cloud Monastery and heard Taoist priest Xiancheng preaching to the little Taoist children. It was obviously some very basic principles, to the point of being straightforward, but it gave that martial artist an epiphany and allowed him to make a breakthrough. After this news spread, it attracted many individual cultivators. Every day, they would listen to Taoist priest Xiancheng's lectures. Of course, not everyone would gain anything from it. However, everyone thought that Taoist priest Xiancheng's lectures were very good. Some of the obscure Taoist scriptures were easy to understand in Taoist priest Xiancheng's lectures. Some of the individual cultivators who had cultivated some Taoist cultivation methods had gained something. When these people did not understand, they would ask Taoist priest Xiancheng for advice. However, Taoist priest Xiancheng said that he did not know martial arts and only knew how to recite Taoist scriptures. Therefore, when people came to ask him for advice, he would answer kindly. Of course, it had to be a question that had nothing to do with martial arts. Looking at the people around him, Taoist priest Xiancheng's eyes showed a hint of surprise. Obviously, he did not expect so many people to come today. Moreover, there were many young talents with profound cultivation among them. However, Taoist priest Xiancheng did not say anything. Behind him, 6 little Taoist children, who were about 10 years old, sat obediently under Taoist priest Xiancheng and listened attentively. Taoist priest Xian Cheng did not take out any books. He just casually played with a horsetail whisk. He looked at the 6 little Taoist children and said, "Today, we will be talking about 5 energies collecting." As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned except for the martial artists who had heard Taoist priest Xian Cheng's preaching before. An ordinary Taoist priest was preaching about 5 energies collecting to a group of little kids who had not even learned martial arts? Was he crazy? Some of the martial artists who came from major powers were sneering in their hearts. Previously, they had heard that this Taoist priest seemed to have some capabilities. Now it seemed like he was just a lunatic. An ordinary Taoist priest actually dared to talk about 5 energies collecting? Most likely, he had not even seen an expert who had reached the 5 energies collecting realm before. The reactions of the outside world did not affect Taoist priest Xian Cheng's preaching. He only said slowly, 5 energies collecting is a cultivation technique of my Taoist lineage. However, today, I will not be talking about martial arts. Instead, I will be talking about intent cultivation and the true meaning of 5 energies collecting. In the 5 energies collecting, the heart stores the spirit, the liver stores the soul, the spleen stores the intent, the lungs store the spirit, and the kidneys store the essence. At the same time, the 5 organs of the human body correspond to the 5 elements of heaven and earth. My Taoist lineage cultivates the body, but at the same time, we also cultivate the heaven and earth. For example, the heart stores the spirit. It corresponds to the southern Scarlet Emperor's fire. It is violent and intense, restless and uneasy. How should one cultivate in such a manner? It's very simple. The heart stores the spirit. You have to focus and focus your mind. Your own temperament will be like a jumping monkey. This is the heart monkey. What you have to do is to subdue it. As the saying goes, sever the heart monkey to become Wukong. This is the logic. Subdue the restless heart monkey in your heart. Then your spirit will have roots. You will be able to soar in the universe and return to your position. The great Tao is the simplest. No matter where it is the same logic. For example, the Buddhist lineage emphasized the emptiness of the 4 elements. When mortals see the world, they tend to see the human heart as the main focus. This leads to their hearts being capricious and their thoughts wandering. But when the Buddha's heart sees the world, it is a stretch of clarity. Only then will one be able to comprehend emptiness and the meaning of Zen. Compared to my Taoist lineage, the Buddhist monks clearly prefer to be tactful. You guys better not learn from them. As he spoke slowly, he even teased the Buddhist sects, the old rivals of the Taoist sections. Instantly, the few little Taoist children broke into smiles. As for the other martial artists present, they all had different expressions. Some understood, and some felt that it was not bad. However, most of the martial artists had a look of disdain on their faces. What the hell was he talking about? Subduing the heart monkey and emptiness of the 4 elements? Did he really think that he could break through the 5 Qis toward the origin realm after subduing it? What kind of joke was this? Chu Xiao and the other 2 revealed a look of contemplation, especially Chu Xiao. He was about to break through to the 3-flower realm. So he attached great importance to the cultivation of the state of mind. Those who did not cultivate the state of mind naturally felt that what Taoist priest Xian Cheng said was nonsense and useless. However, for Chu Xiao, what Taoist priest Xian Cheng said made him feel like he was suddenly enlightened. These words were useless for cultivation itself. It could not increase one's cultivation, and it was not a way to cultivate martial arts. However, Taoist priest Xian Cheng's words seemed to have pointed out a bright path for Chu Xiao. As long as he followed this direction, the 3-flower and 5 Qis would be visible. Xie Xiaolu murmured. This old Taoist is quite skilled. Do you guys think he really doesn't know martial arts? Chu Xiao shook his head and said, I can't be sure. What he said has nothing to do with martial arts. It is just pure Taoist theory of cultivating the mind. It is normal for a person who has been immersed in Taoism for many years to be able to understand this. However, if this old Taoist really knows martial arts, then his strength will definitely be beyond our imagination. Xie Xiaolu nodded. This old Taoist's understanding of the five qis toward the origin realm was dozens of times more thorough than the martial artists who had already stepped into this realm. If he really was a martial artist, then he would probably be a grandmaster who could establish his own sect. Taoist priest Xiancheng stretched his body. He had just talked about the five qis toward the origin realm, and there were still 4 more that he was going to talk about. However, at this moment, a sharp female voice filled with hatred suddenly came from outside the crowd. Chu Xiao. It's actually you. The crowd looked back and saw a skinny woman dressed in a white warrior suit. Her eyes were red as she pointed at Chu Xiao. She looked like she wanted to swallow him alive. This woman was none other than Yan Tingting of the Divine Force sect. In fact, Yan Tingting did not plan to come to this God Weapon conference. In fact, the Divine Force sect did not even plan to participate in the entire conference. After all, there were no outstanding people among the younger generation of the Divine Force sect. Even if they came, they would only embarrass themselves. Therefore, it was better not to come. However, Yan Tingting had been sulking in the Divine Force sect. Yan Huainan felt sorry for his daughter, and did not want to see her sulking. Therefore, he sent her to participate in the God Weapon conference. But in fact, she had come to the land of Eastern Qi to relax. Most importantly, Yan Huainan knew why Yan Tingting was so sulky. This time, the God Weapon conference in Eastern Qi was attended by all the outstanding young talents of the pugilistic world. Yan Huainan did not care whether the other party was from a big sect or a common person in the pugilistic world. As long as Yan Tingting liked one, Yan Huainan would agree. Anyway, it was fine as long as she could forget about that useless Yu Luchuan. Chapter 224. In fact, Yan Tingting was in a good mood on the way to Eastern Qi. After all, Yu Luchuan had been dead for a long time. She also heard that Chu Xiao had been chased to Wei County by a few major forces, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. The knot in her heart was finally resolved. Therefore, after arriving at the Ji State Prefecture, Yan Tingting enjoyed herself for 2 days. Today, she saw that the weather was good, so she came to the Mirror Lake for a walk. When she saw a group of people gathered here, she came to watch the fun. However, who would have thought that she would see the person she hated so much, Chu Xiao? He was actually still alive. Yan Tingting had never seen Chu Xiao before, but she hated Chu Xiao so much. Naturally, she bought a portrait of Chu Xiao from Wind Sweeping Tower. On the contrary, Chu Xiao had never seen Yan Tingting. He had heard that the Divine Force sect had participated in hunting him down and so on. However, the Divine Force sect was just putting on an act, so Chu Xiao did not care. Now that he saw Yan Tingting's expression, Chu Xiao was dumbfounded. Who was this woman? Why did she look like she was going to swallow him? As for the others, when they saw this scene, they all smiled ambiguously. Looking at Yan Tingting's expression, they thought that Chu Xiao had played some unfaithful man's tricks and abandoned her after seducing her. That was why Yan Tingting came looking for him. However, at this time, Chu Xiao frowned and said, "Who are you? Do I know you?" Hearing this, everyone was stunned. What was going on? The woman looked like she was going to swallow him alive, but the man did not know him at all? At this time, Yan Tingting was even more furious. She hated Chu Xiao to death, but Chu Xiao did not know her at all. Was there anything more ironic than this? Bai Wuji looked at Chu Xiao with a gloating expression and said, "This is Yan Tingting from the Divine Force sect. You killed her beloved, but now she doesn't even recognize you. Isn't that a bit too much?" Hearing Bai Wuji's words, Chu Xiao finally understood that they were here because of Yu Luchuan. Although killing the Yu clan of Bailing was a crucial step for Chu Xiao to enter the Longhu leaderboard, to be honest, Chu Xiao did not really care about it. For the current Chu Xiao, he could destroy a family like the Yu clan of Bailing with a wave of his hand. Was there a need for him to remember something like this? Therefore, Chu Xiao spread out his hands and said to Yan Tingting, "Are you here to take revenge for that trash Yu Luchuan? To be honest, I don't understand you." The dignified miss of the Divine Force sect actually fell in love with that trash. And because of that trash, you even chased after me. Is it worth it? Is the power of love so terrifying? At this time, everyone around finally understood. It was not a drama of abandonment, but rather, Chu Xiu had killed the lover of the Divine Force Sect's Mississippi. She was here to take revenge. However, they also liked to watch this kind of revenge drama. At least it was more interesting than listening to the old Taoist priest Xian Cheng's nonsense. When Yan Tingting heard Chu Xiu calling Yu Luchuan trash, she shouted with bloodshot eyes, "Chu Xiu, I'll kill you. I'm going to kill you." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There are many people in this world who want to kill me. It doesn't matter if you're here or not. However, does your father know that you want to kill me? Sect Master Yin is a sensible man. If he really wanted to kill me, the Divine Force Sect wouldn't have just put up a show." Yan Tingting looked at the Divine Force Sect's martial artists beside her with bloodshot eyes and said with hatred, "All of you go. Kill Chu Xiu." Yan Tingting had more than 10 Divine Force Sect's martial artists with her. Most of them were at the innate stage or physical invulnerability. Only 2 old men were at the 3-flower realm. Aside from Yan Huainan, the Divine Force Sect's other martial artists weren't that strong. Most of the martial artists who protected Yan Tingting were at the physical invulnerability realm and inner invulnerability realm. Martial artists of this level could keep Yan Tingting safe in Yan'an. This time, because they were coming to Eastern Qi, Yan Huainan had 2 old men from the Divine Force Sect protect Yan Tingting. He was afraid that something might happen to his precious daughter. The other people from the Divine Force Sect wanted to make a move, but they were stopped by the 2 old men from the Divine Force Sect. The 2 men asked Chu Xiu with a serious expression, "Aren't you a killer from the Blue Dragon Society? How did you become a member of the Guanzhong torture room?" It was normal for the other martial artists to not recognize the Guanzhong torture room. However, as one of the 7 sects and 8 schools, the Divine Force Sect naturally recognized the symbol of the Guanzhong torture room. The Northern Yan martial artist who had seen Chu Xiu in the Dragon Gathering Pavilion a few days ago said, "How old is your information? This is the Guanxi Patrol Inspector of the Guanzhong torture room now." As soon as he said this, Bai Wuji immediately glared at him. "You talk too much." When the 2 old men from the Divine Force Sect heard this, their expressions changed slightly. If Chu Xiu was still a small killer from the Blue Dragon Society, as long as he was not in the territory of the Heavenly Sin Division, they would still dare to make a move. The killers of the Blue Dragon Society were everywhere in the martial world. They had never heard that the Blue Dragon Society would make a big move to avenge a small killer. However, the Guanzhong torture room was different. Moreover, Chu Xiu was the patrol inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. Of course, they knew what the position of the patrol inspector was. Even in the Guanzhong torture room, the patrol inspector was the backbone of the power. If they really killed Chu Xiu here, then the Divine Force Sect would definitely become the enemy of the Guanzhong torture room. Although the Guanzhong torture room had been very low-key in recent years, only moving around in the Guanzhong Pass and rarely appearing in the martial world. Even in the songs of the martial world, the Guanzhong torture room did not have a place in the martial world. However, those who came from the big sects knew that the strength of the Guanzhong torture room was not inferior to some of the top sects in the martial world. At the very least, they were much stronger than the Divine Force Sect. Therefore, the 2 old men immediately stood in front of Yan Tingting and tried to persuade her. "Miss, forget it. The dead cannot come back to life. Even if you kill Chu Xiu, Yu Luchuan will not come back to life. Look at the young talents in the God Weapon Conference. Which one of them is not stronger than Yu Luchuan? Moreover, the current Chu Xiu is not the same as before. He is the patrol inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. Once we touch him, we will become enemies with the Guanzhong torture room. At that time, it will bring great trouble to the Divine Force Sect." Yan Tingting did not care about this at this time. Seeing that the people on her side did not make a move, she took out a dagger and placed it on her neck. She shouted, "Are you going to make a move or not? If you don't make a move, I will die. At that time, I want to see how you will explain to my father." Yan Tingting's action immediately frightened the warriors of the Divine Force Sect. The 2 old men hurriedly smiled bitterly and said, "Miss, calm down. Calm down. We will make a move now." They had served Yan Tingting for so many years. In the past, when they were in the south of Yan, Yan Tingting was actually very unruly. When the young masters of the large clans offended her, Yan Tingting immediately ordered people to break their legs. If those people wanted to take revenge, then Yan Tingting would directly use her father's mode. It was because of her protective father that no one in the south of Yan dared to offend Yan Tingting. However, the problem was that Yan Tingting could only be said to be a little unruly in the past. She was not like now, actually using her own life to threaten the interests of the Divine Force sect. This was simply nonsense. However, no matter how ridiculous Yan Tingting was, they still had to make a move. Otherwise, if something really happened to this miss in their hands, they would not have an easy time either. Thinking about how much Yan Huainan treasured his daughter, these disciples of the Divine Force sect trembled. Since they did not want to die, the person who would die could only be Chu Xiu. Although this was not the south of Yan, it was also not Guangzhong. In an instant, over 10 warriors of the Divine Force sect surrounded Chu Xiu. They took out their weapons and glared at Chu Xiu fiercely. One of the elders held a long saber in his hand and stared at Chu Xiu. He said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, we do not want to be enemies with you, nor do we want to incur the wrath of the Guangzhong torture room. However, as you have seen, you have offended the miss greatly. We have no choice but to make a move. If you surrender now and let the miss feel at ease, I can still make the decision to try my best to preserve your life. When the time comes, the Guangzhong torture room will come to collect you." Chu Xiu looked straight at the elder, and his tone did not change at all. He said, "Old man, do you really think that those who can become patrol in a place like the Guangzhong torture room, which does not look at background and only looks at ability, are all idiots? How can you say such ridiculous things?" A cold look appeared in the elder's eyes as he said, "Since you do not know what is good for you, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I have something to say to you. The Divine Force sect belongs to Yan Huainan, but your lives are your own. It is not easy for an old man to live to such an old age. Wouldn't it be better to retire peacefully from the martial world and retire? Why must you meet a violent death? How inauspicious." Chu Xiu's words were very vicious, especially to a warrior who was not young anymore. It was no different from cursing the other party to die. The elder said coldly, "A violent death? I want to see today who the violent death is." Before he could finish speaking, Chu Xiu had already moved. His movement caused the weather to change. He formed a seal with one hand, and the power of the internal binding seal erupted. He could move unhindered in the heavens and earth. This was the extreme speed. The red sleeve blade was unsheathed. Before the blood-colored edge could completely shine, it was wrapped in endless black mist. Chu Xiu's blade, Chu Xiu's hand, and Chu Xiu's eyes were already filled with an extremely dense demonic aura of death. The 3 blades of Avicii. In the face of a warrior at the 3-flower realm, Chu Xiu immediately unleashed the second of the 3 blades of Avicii. It was even mixed with the power of the great chaos of heaven and earth. This blade was the pinnacle of speed and power. The elder from the Divine Martial Gate didn't even have the time to react. By the time he reacted, Chu Xiu had already appeared in front of him. The blade that was surging with demonic aura slashed down. Although the elder had also erupted with all the astral energy in his body in an attempt to raise his blade to block, he was forcibly sliced into 2 by the blade. His corpse fell to the ground with a loud bang, but strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out. Chapter 225. At that moment, Chu Xiu stood there with his sword in hand. The crimson blade was wrapped in black mist, and there was not even the slightest emotion in his eyes. He looked at the people from the Divine Martial sect, as if he was looking at a group of dead people. In the past, Chu Xiu would forcibly suppress the demonic qi in his body after using the 3 cuts of Avicii. However, this time, Chu Xiu did not continue to suppress the demonic qi. Instead, he allowed it to surge in his body. Looking at the people from the Divine Force sect, Chu Xiu's voice was extremely cold, without the slightest emotion. It was so stiff that it was like a mechanical puppet. "I'm not good at saving people, but I'm good at killing people. Since you're all tired of living, then I'll fulfill your wish. I'll let you be the role models of loyalty to the sect." Another old man from the Divine Force sect looked at Chu Xiu and the corpse on the ground, dumbfounded. He even suspected that what he saw was an illusion. Chu Xiu was a physical invulnerability expert, but he killed a three-flower realm martial artist with a single slash. If this kind of thing was said by someone else, others would definitely think it was nonsense. However, the result was right before their eyes. Not only could the people from the Divine Force sect not accept it, but even the other martial artists present were shocked. When Chu Xiu did not move, they all came with the mood to watch the show. However, when Chu Xiu moved, everyone's expression changed. With this kind of strength, let alone the top 20 on the Longhu leaderboard, he could probably stand shoulder to shoulder with the top 10 or even the top 5, right? Seeing this scene, everyone subconsciously retreated, opening up some distance between them. Mo Tianlin murmured. No wonder Uncle Qi, the king of Annals Consecrator, lost to him. As expected, this Chu Xiu probably has the strength to fight against the three-flower realm. No. It should be said that he can instantly kill most three-flower realm martial artists. Xie Xiaolu looked at Chu Xiu, raised his eyebrows and said, Uncle Qi, who was guarding the 7th floor of the Dragon Gathering Pavilion, also lost to him? But don't be surprised by Chu Xiu's strength. Sometimes a fight depends on the brain. This Chu Xiu's brain is not inferior to his martial arts. Do you really think he can kill those with three-flower realm at once prominence like killing chickens? It was just a show of strength. In terms of aura, he had already suppressed the Divine Martial sect. Although he was alone, his aura was stronger than the dozen people from the Divine Martial sect. Those people from the Divine Force sect have already lost their morale. Facing Chu Xiu, they are all afraid. Those who have cowardice in their hearts, no matter how strong they are, have already been defeated before the battle even started. Xie Xiaolu himself was an expert with the blade. Different from the sword, the blade was tyrannical and focused on imposing manner. Chu Xiu's blade not only made his own imposing manner stand at the peak, but it also cut off all of the opponent's imposing manner. At this time, the people from the Divine Force sect in the field were indeed as Xie Xiaolu had guessed. Under Chu Xiu's stunning and even frightening blade, their courage had been cut off, and they were afraid. This was completely different from the script they had imagined. The demonic qi around Chu Xiu had not dissipated, and he walked toward the group of people from the Divine Force sect with a terrifying demonic qi and death intent. In this world, you can't wake up a person who is pretending to be asleep, nor can you stop a person who is courting death. Originally, I didn't want to kill before the God Weapon Conference began. Since you guys are courting death, then I will fulfill your wish. It will also help my blade sharpen. Chu Xiu's voice was gloomy and cold, without the slightest emotion. At this time, his entire body was being corroded by the demonic qi of the 3 blades of Avicii, but Chu Xiu did not have the slightest intention of suppressing it. After using the 3 sabers of Avicii for such a long time, Chu Xiu was also constantly familiarizing himself with the power of this saber. He was also constantly familiarizing himself with the power of the backlash. Now he was confident that he could suppress the backlash from the second saber. The most important thing was that when he listened to Daoist Xiancheng's sermon just now, he had some enlightenment. Cutting off the inner ape to become Wukong. Now the demonic qi's backlash affected Chu Xiu's mind, causing his heart to be filled with hatred and demonic qi, turning him into a demon ape. In the past, Chu Xiu's method was to use his own mental power and the inner lion seal to forcibly destroy the power of the backlash. This ensured that he would not be affected by the power of the 3 blades of Avicii. But now Chu Xiu had another idea. Whether it was the inner demon or the inner ape, it was something that belonged to him. Why did he have to destroy it instead of subduing it and using it for his own use? What Daoist Xiancheng talked about was the 5 qis collecting in mind, not martial arts. Therefore, it could be applied everywhere. Even though Chu Xiu had not yet reached the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, it did not hinder Chu Xiu from comprehending and using it. Right now, Chu Xiu was doing this. He treated the demonic qi's backlash as a part of his body. No matter how the demonic qi affected his mind, he tried his best to empty it to the extreme. At this moment, Chu Xiu's heart was like an 8 trigrams furnace, refining his inner ape. No matter how strong the demonic qi was, it could only be used as fuel for this 8 trigrams furnace, allowing Chu Xiu to completely subdue the inner ape. The others could not see anything from Chu Xiu's current state, but Taoist Xiancheng, who was standing at the back, frowned and mumbled. He only heard it once, and he understood the principle of subduing the inner ape. This kind of comprehension is very rare among the younger generation. Unfortunately, he walked the wrong path. No, it should be said that he knew he was walking the wrong path, but he still chose to walk it. Taoist Xiancheng shook his head, feeling a little conflicted. Listening to his sermon, Chu Xiu comprehended the principle, and then immediately started killing. Did this count as indirectly killing? It seemed like he had to keep a low profile in the future. He couldn't say these things in public. At this moment, Chu Xiu walked towards the people from the Divine Martial Sect. Without waiting for the people from the Divine Martial Sect to speak, he directly slashed down with his saber. The demonic chi of the Avicii Dao's 3 sabers contained the power of the blood-refined deity shield. When the two of them combined, the power was extremely evil, causing the old man from the Divine Martial Sect to be extremely shocked. He turned to the few Xiantian realm martial artists and shouted, "You guys protect the young Mississippi. The rest of you follow me." Just now, Chu Xiu's strike had gained the upper hand by a show of strength, and it had already destroyed their courage. At this moment, they were not thinking about how to kill Chu Xiu, but how to survive under Chu Xiu's blade. The old man from the Divine Martial Sect held a long spear in his hand, and a violent burst of gang qi erupted. He smashed it down towards Chu Xiu. Although his momentum was surging, it was suppressed by Chu Xiu. Just now, Chu Xiu had unleashed his speed and strength, as well as his own essence, qi and spirit to the extreme. He had gained the upper hand by making a show of strength, which was why he was able to instantly kill an unsuspecting 3-flower realm warrior. Now that they were in a real battle, Chu Xiu naturally couldn't slash the same way. However, with his current strength and foundation, it was enough to compete with ordinary 3-flower realm martial artists, especially since the old man from the Divine Martial Sect was not young anymore. He was no longer at his peak. Under this attack, the other party directly grunted and took a few steps back. At this time, several other inner and physical invulnerability realm martial artists of the Divine Martial Sect also rushed forward. Powerful gang qi suddenly erupted. Under the siege, there was a murderous intent coming from all directions. The demonic qi around Chu Xiu flourished. He could still continue to suppress the power of the 3 blades of Avicii. At that moment, his whole body was soaked in demonic qi. It was as if a demon king had descended. That pure and evil demonic qi with monstrous hatred was probably something that even a real demonic expert would be ashamed of. The long saber slashed down, and in an instant, with Chu Xiu as the center, a magnificent saber light spilled out. There was a bright crimson in the black demonic qi. Those Divine Martial Sect martial artists were shocked to find that their gang qi was easily torn apart like tofu in the evil and bright saber light. If Chu Xiu's red sleeve saber of the dusk drizzle was just a continuous drizzle, then now it was a torrential rainstorm. Under the siege, those inner invulnerability realm martial artists couldn't resist and were directly beheaded. As for the other physical invulnerability realm martial artists, they were not much better off. They were directly blasted away, and the weapons in their hands suddenly spat out blood. With one move, he directly broke through the siege of several people with brute force. The onlooking martial artists, especially those martial artists of the same realm as Chu Xiu, all had grave expressions. This level of gang qi was already beyond their imagination. It wasn't a matter of whether you wanted to block it or not, but whether you could block it or not. After one slash, Chu Xiu slightly frowned. The demonic qi attracted by the 3 blades of Avicii was really not that easy to subdue. Every time he used it, the demonic qi became more turbulent. In the end, the demonic qi was so strong that Chu Xiu had to use the 3 blades of Avicii. Take the young lady and escape. The old man from the Divine Martial Sect with the spear rushed up again, but what greeted him was an overwhelming and powerful saber light. Those innate realm martial artists wanted to take Yan Tingting away, but at this time, Yan Tingting stared at Chu Xiu with bloodshot eyes. Her eyes were filled with a strong sense of unwillingness. Previously, she wanted to kill Chu Xiu, but her father didn't allow it and even grounded her. Now that she finally had a chance to take revenge, the strength that Chu Xiu displayed made her despair. "Young lady, let's go." This Chu Xiu's strength is simply abnormal. Even if martial Uncle Qiu is in the three-flower realm, he won't be able to resist for long. The other disciples of the divine martial sect were still trying to persuade her. However, no matter what they said, Yan Tingting still didn't move. The hatred in her eyes grew stronger and stronger. Neither Chu Xiu nor Nie Donglu understood why Yan Tingting would like a good-for-nothing like Yu Luchuan. After all, in their opinion, there was nothing good about Yu Luchuan other than his good looks. Even if Nie Donglu claimed that he was good friends with Yu Luchuan, it was only because of his status. Otherwise, how could a good-for-nothing like him be worthy of calling him brother? There were many beautiful women in the world, and there were also many handsome men. With the power of the divine martial sect, Yan Tingting's future husband would definitely be the kind of person with good looks. Unfortunately, Yan Tingting only loved Yu Luchuan. It could only be said that there was no reason for love. Just like Yan Tingting now, killing Chu Xiu was not only to avenge Yu Luchuan, but also to become her obsession. Chapter 226. A warrior at the three-flower realm of converging one's essence, qi, and spirit were unified. Compared to those at the physical invulnerability realm, the most obvious difference was that their explosive power was more than a level higher. Unfortunately, even if Chu Xiu had not cultivated his essence, qi, and spirit to the level of unification, his explosive power was still astonishing. Back in the Guanzhong torture room, even Wei Hanshan, who was an inspector and was in his prime, was no match for Chu Xiu, let alone the old man from the Divine Force sect. His strength was even weaker than Wei Hanshan's. Therefore, the old man from the Divine Force sect already felt that he was no match for Chu Xiu's powerful Devil Qi blade aura. The old man from the Divine Force sect was fighting desperately to stop Chu Xiu so that Yan Tingting could escape. In fact, he was already prepared to die. This was Eastern Qi. Before this, they thought that no one would come to help Chu Xiu. Now that they were in a desperate situation, they realized that no one would come to help them either. Previously, when Chu Xiu killed another warrior at the three-flower realm of converging one's essence with his blade, he had completely destroyed their courage. Even if they all attacked together, they would still be no match for Chu Xiu. Reality had proven all of this. However, even though he knew that he was courting death, the old man from the Divine Force sect did not want to escape. It was not because he was so loyal to the Divine Force sect and Yan Huainan that he could sacrifice his life for Yan Tingting. It was because his children were also cultivating in the Divine Force sect. Yan Huainan had sent him to protect his daughter precisely because he was experienced in the martial world. In the end, Yan Tingting had met with a mishap because of him. Regardless of whether it was because of him or not, he would be severely punished, and it would even implicate his descendants in the sect. Therefore, it was better to fight to the death here and let Yan Tingting escape. That way, Yan Huainan would at least remember his contribution and treat his children well. With that thought in mind, the old man from the Divine Force sect did not care about anything else. He began to burn the little blood he had left and began to fight with Chu Xiu. However, right at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly retreated. He formed a seal with one hand, and the surging devil qi was completely suppressed by him. This caused the eyes of the divine martial sect's elder to brighten. He knew that it was impossible for this secret method to maintain such a powerful force all the time. Now it seemed that the secret method's time limit was up. If it continued to be used, it might even cause a certain backlash. At this time, it was the time when Chu Xiu was at his weakest. As expected, after Chu Xiu suppressed the power of the 3 cuts of Avicenaraka in his body, his face even turned a little pale. Previously, Chu Xiu had used the 2nd cut of the 3 cuts of Avicenaraka many times. After using it, he would immediately suppress the devil qi. Therefore, apart from the first time, Chu Xiu had almost never suffered from a backlash. This time, however, Chu Xiu had endured for such a long time without suppressing the demonic aura. Instead, he had used the demonic aura to attack his enemies. Although it was very powerful, the consumption was also abnormally intense. To be precise, this was not a consumption of his true energy or inner force, but a consumption of his mind. However, in the eyes of the old man from the Divine Force sect, Chu Xiu had consumed too much energy. This was also his only chance. In an instant, a dazzling light erupted from the spear in the old man's hand. It was as scorching and resplendent as a blazing sun. But there was a trace of blood mixed within it. It was the power brought about by the burning of his vital energy. The spear was like a dragon, a rainbow piercing the sun. This spear thrust condensed the strongest power of the old man from the Divine Force sect. The burning power of vital qi even had a part of the effect of destroying the devil. Although it was not as good as a Buddhist cultivation method, it could still restrain a martial artist like Chu Xiu who had cultivated in devil arts. However, at this time Chu Xiu, who bore the brunt of the attack, revealed a mocking smile. When the Divine Force sect's old man's spear fell, Chu Xiu's hand formed the great Vajrawheel seal. The Buddha's light that bloomed was even more dazzling than the old man's spear, who said that he only knew devil arts. This old man from the Divine Force sect probably didn't even have basic information about him before coming to seek revenge. Wasn't he just courting death? Under the powerful great Vajrawheel seal, the sound of shattering astral energy rang out. The spear in the old man's hand was also a fourth revolution precious weapon. However, it was directly shattered by Chu Xiu's great Vajrawheel seal. The old man from the Divine Force sect was also sent flying more than 10 steps by Chu Xiu. In the end, he couldn't hold on any longer. He spat out a mouthful of blood and his face turned deathly pale. Before, Chu Xiu's pale face was only because he had consumed too much of his vital qi. Now the Divine Force sect's old man's face was pale because he was about to run out of energy. Miss, hurry up and leave. The old man from the Divine Force sect looked at Yan Tingting, who still hadn't left. His eyes were filled with despair, but he couldn't persuade Yan Tingting anymore. His desperate attack had been broken by Chu Xiu, and he was severely injured by the great Vajrawheel seal. At his age, he couldn't hold on any longer. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man from the Divine Force sect fell to the ground with a loud thud. The crowd immediately went into an uproar. 2-3 Flower Realm warriors, as well as several inner and outer invulnerability realm warriors, were killed and seriously injured by Chu Xiu in the blink of an eye. They couldn't even find a word to describe his strength other than terrifying. Meanwhile, in the field, after dealing with the 2-3 Flower Realm warriors, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and revealed a hint of murderous intent as he walked toward Yan Tingting. In fact, Chu Xiu didn't like to kill women. After all, he was a man, and it was somewhat degrading for him to always kill women. However, the premise was that the other party didn't provoke him and didn't affect his interests. Otherwise, if Chu Xiu wanted to kill them, he wouldn't care about men or women. He only cared about the living and the dead. He killed Yu Luchuan. It didn't matter if Yan Tingting hated him or resented him. However, she now hated Chu Xiu to the extreme. As long as there was a chance, Chu Xiu was sure that this woman would definitely kill him. Therefore, if he let her live, countless troubles would be waiting for Chu Xiu. It was better to kill her now and put an end to it. As for the Divine Force sect, Chu Xiu really didn't believe that Yan Huainan would dare to go to the Guanzhong torture room and ask for Guan Xiu. Whether it was in terms of status or strength, the Guanzhong torture room far surpassed the Divine Force sect. Most importantly, this was the style of the Guanzhong torture room. If you don't provoke me, I won't provoke you. The Guanzhong torture room never took the initiative to cause trouble, but they were never afraid of it. The few innate stage warriors guarding in front of Yan Tingting saw Chu Xiu walking over. They weren't as useless as running away in fear, but they still said in a slightly trembling voice, "Don't come over. Chu Xiu, are you crazy? Do you know that if you kill the young lady, you will never rest until the Divine Force sect is dead?" Chu Xiu held his saber and said indifferently, "Not rest until the Divine Force sect is dead? If I don't kill her, she will definitely continue to create all kinds of trouble to deal with me. At that time, the Divine Force sect and I will also not rest until the Divine Force sect is dead. Therefore, why don't I finish her off earlier? So please go to hell." However, at this moment, Yan Tingting suddenly raised her head and shouted to the surrounding warriors who were watching the show, "I will marry whoever kills him." As soon as she said this, everyone present was in an uproar. This young lady of the Divine Force sect was probably mad with anger. How could she say such words? However, Yan Tingting said with hatred in her hoarse voice, I swear by the divine force sect's fortune that if anyone can kill Chu Xiu, I will marry him today. Everyone here can be a witness. Hearing Yan Tingting use the divine force sect to swear, everyone present couldn't help but change their expressions. What Yan Tingting said should be true. Her reputation wasn't worth much, but the divine force sect was one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. As Yan Huainan's daughter, she used the divine force sect's fortune to swear. This couldn't be false. Hearing this, there were many people who were tempted. Although they knew that Yan Tingting was using her marriage as the price to kill Chu Xiu purely out of hatred, they didn't like Yan Tingting because of love or anything like that, but because of Yan Tingting's identity. She was the young lady of the divine force sect. Moreover, Yan Tingting's appearance wasn't bad. Those disciples of the big sects might not like her, but some rogue cultivators or warriors from small sects were tempted. However, although they were tempted, no one made a move. It wasn't that Yan Tingting wasn't attractive enough, but Chu Xiu's power just now was too shocking, and it scared them. He had killed 2 3-flower realm martial artists in a row. Even if they were old, they were still genuine 3-flower realm martial artists. Moreover, the other inner and physical invulnerability realm martial artists were no match for him. Becoming the son-in-law of the divine force sect was very attractive, but the premise was that one had to weigh one's capabilities. Seeing that everyone present was scared by Chu Xiu's power, and didn't dare to make a move, Yan Tingting shouted at them. What are you afraid of? No matter how strong Chu Xiu is, he is only in the physical invulnerability realm. Look at his face. Just now, the people of the divine force sect used up most of his inner force. There are so many of you, and you still don't dare to make a move? Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, Yan Tingting gritted her teeth and said, I'm my father's only daughter, and the divine force sect doesn't have any outstanding disciples in this generation. Whoever marries me will receive all the resources and support of the divine force sect, and he will be the next sect master of the divine force sect. As soon as these words came out, the innate realm warriors who were protecting Yan Tingting were shocked. The young lady had gone crazy. For the sake of revenge, she didn't care about anything else. How could she make such a promise? Although Yan Huainan's words carried weight in the divine force sect, the divine force sect was still a sect, not an aristocratic family. The next sect master looked at strength, not relationship with Yan Huainan. Now that Yan Tingting made such a promise here, if word got back to the divine force sect, most of the disciples in the divine force sect would be dissatisfied. It might even cause unrest in the sect. Chapter 227. The disciples of the divine force sect had guessed correctly. Yan Tingting was indeed a little crazy. For the sake of revenge, she did not care about anything else. In fact, before she met Chu Xiu, her emotions had almost stabilized. After all, Yu Luchuan had been dead for such a long time. When she found a new lover, she might forget about this matter. However, who would have thought that she would meet Chu Xiu here, causing her hatred to surge? She thought that she could kill Chu Xiu, but in the end, her subordinates were killed by Chu Xiu. In such a desperate situation, she, who was originally extreme, went completely crazy and did not care about anything else. Yan Tingting's crazy actions did attract the surrounding warriors, especially those who were itinerant cultivators and those from small sections. If they married Yan Tingting, they would be the successors of the divine force sect. That was the divine force sect, one of the 7 sects and 8 schools. Although some of the people present were not from the northern Yan kingdom, they had some understanding of the divine force sect and knew the situation of the divine force sect. In the entire divine force sect, Yan Huainan's words carried enormous weight. The divine force sect had risen because of Yan Huainan. The next generation did not have any outstanding figures. Even for this God Weapon conference, except for Yan Tingting, who came to relax, the divine force sect did not send anyone else. Since this was the case, Yan Tingting's words were not deceiving them. It was really possible. The crowd looked at the slightly pale Chu Xiu and gradually gathered around him. Most of them were itinerant cultivators and warriors from small sections. Their eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. They had seen Chu Xiu's strength. It would be very terrifying to fight with such a terrifying person. Moreover, there was the Guanzhong torture room behind him. If they touched Chu Xiu, they would offend the Guanzhong torture room. These were all risks. However, the problem was that under the temptation of becoming Yan Huainan's son-in-law and the successor of the Divine Force sect, these risks could be offset. Previously they did not make a move, because the temptation was not enough. But now the benefits were enough, to the point that they did not even dare to dream about it. In the face of such temptation, not to mention the risk, they were even willing to gamble with their lives. Moreover, there were people like Xie Xiaolu who also saw through Chu Xiu's depth. The power that Chu Xiu displayed just now was indeed astonishing, but it was impossible for him to have the strength to kill a 3-flower realm cultivator as easily as killing a chicken. Even the little celestial master, Zhang Qingjin of Longhu Mountain, was not as terrifying as Chu Xiu when he was in the physical invulnerability realm. He could easily kill a 3-flower realm martial artist with a single slash. That was why Chu Xiu's first slash was the ultimate attack with all his strength. Such an attack could not be used casually. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu frowned slightly. It was indeed troublesome to offend a woman. There were 3 types of people in the martial world that should not be messed with: children, the elderly, and women. When a child walked the martial world, one would never know whether the other party was an old monster who had regained his youth after cultivating a secret technique, or if there was an old monster standing behind the child. As for the elderly, the young were afraid of the strong. Those old people in the martial world represented the decline of their qi and blood, which represented the decline of their combat power. Although they looked weak, in reality, such old people were the most terrifying. Because they were already at the end of their lifespan, they could fight to the death with no qualms. On the other hand, one still had a good time and a bright future. No matter how one looked at it, one would be at a disadvantage. As for women, there was no need to say much. As women, they were the best weapons and could bring you a lot of trouble. For example, Chu Xiu was now. After looking around, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a hint of coldness. He said, blinded by greed, "All of you want to be Yan Huainan's son-in-law? Let me give you a word of advice. In the end, if you can't be Yan Huainan's son-in-law, I'm afraid you will go to hell and become the son-in-law of the king of hell." With the temptation of benefits in front of them, Chu Xiu's words did not scare these people away. Among them, a handsome man in a blue shirt, holding a folding fan, and dressed like a young master of an aristocratic family stood out and sneered. Blinded by greed? You actually wanted to kill a woman like Miss Yan. You're simply deranged. Moreover, the person I, Zhu Wuhe, respect the sect master of Yan Huainan the most in my life. If you want to touch Miss Yan, you will have to go through me first. The man who spoke was Zhu Wuhe, the eldest son of the Zhu family, a small family in eastern Qi. His strength was not bad, and he had reached the physical invulnerability realm at a young age. His father, the head of the Zhu family, was also in the physical invulnerability realm. It could be said that the small Zhu family could no longer accommodate him, and they could not provide him with enough cultivation resources. Zhu Wuhe did not come to the God Weapon Conference to have any illusions about the God Weapon. He just wanted to make friends with some disciples of the big sections. He did not expect to encounter such a good thing. He thought highly of himself, and he even believed that if he had been born in one of the 9 big aristocratic families instead of a small family like the Zhu family, his current achievements would not be any worse than those elites on the Longhu list. If he could really kill Chu Xiu this time, marry Yan Tingting, become Yan Huainan's son-in-law, and obtain the support of the entire Divine Force sect, he would reach the peak of his life. The other warriors cast a disdainful glance at Zhu Wuhe. If he wanted to fight, then fight. Why did he have to use such high-sounding reasons? He had never left Eastern Qi in his life, so why did he have to talk about admiring Yan Huainan? However, since Zhu Wuhe was the first to stand out, there was a second one. An ugly, brawny man in his 30s, holding a giant axe, also stood out and said with a laugh, "I have never liked a woman in my life. Now that I have the opportunity to become the son-in-law of the Divine Force sect master, I would like to give it a try." Seeing that this brawny man also wanted to join in the fun, the crowd instantly felt a chill run down their spines. This brawny man was Evil Tiger Peng Zue, a well-known rogue cultivator of this generation in Chonglin County. He used to be a bandit in his early years, and he even built a small mountain stronghold of his own, but it was annihilated by the soldiers. Later on, although he no longer made a living as a bandit, it was still not a good thing. He even worked as a hanger-on for others, and he ended up betraying his master. Moreover, this Peng Zue was nearly 3 meters tall, with dark skin and an ugly appearance. It was unbearable to look at him standing next to a petite woman like Yen Tingting. Peng Zue, with your conduct, even if you really went to the Divine Force sect, I'm afraid you would be kicked out by Sect Master Yen. Why don't you take a good look at yourself in the mirror? Do you think you are worthy of marrying Miss Yen with that appearance of yours? A handsome and elegant man with 2 swords on his back, wearing a tight-fitting warrior suit, walked out from the crowd with a proud expression on his face. It's Gong Sun Lu, the twin Scarlet Swords. Ranked 32nd on the Dragon and Tiger list, Gong Sun Lu. The crowd immediately went into an uproar. This was the first time a warrior on the Dragon and Tiger list stood out to attack Chu Xiao. At the back of the crowd, Mo Tianlin frowned and said, "Why is this shit stirrer on the Dragon and Tiger list here?" Xie Xiaolu curled his lips and said, "Watch your words. If he is a shit stirrer, then what are we?" Although this Gong Sun Lu was also a warrior on the Dragon and Tiger list, his conduct was somewhat despicable. The Dragon and Tiger list was ranked according to fame and strength. This Gong Sun Lu had some strength, but he was a rogue cultivator, and his fame was not outstanding. It would be very difficult for him to step into the top 50 of the Dragon and Tiger list with his meager strength. Therefore, this Gong Sun Lu came up with an idea, and that was to specifically challenge those who were not as strong as him, but were very famous and ranked ahead of him on the list. Furthermore, they were rogue cultivators. Before the battle, he would collect detailed information about them, and only when he was 99% sure of winning would he dare to make a move. In the martial world, the young heroes who could be ranked on the Dragon and Tiger list were all challenging warriors who were stronger than them. In the end, this Gong Sun Lu was just doing it for the sake of getting on the list. Sometimes he would even pick on his opponents when they were weak, just to get on the Dragon and Tiger list. This was simply shameless, which was why he was called the shit stirrer of the Dragon and Tiger list. Normal warriors might respect him because of his ranking on the Dragon and Tiger list, but in the eyes of Mo Tianlin and the others, this guy was just a clown. Although this Gong Sun Lu looked young, he was actually more than 30 years old. In a few years, he would be completely kicked out of the Dragon and Tiger list by the wind-sweeping tower. Therefore, he came to the God Weapon Conference this time to gain a last bit of fame, but he did not expect to encounter such a good thing. If he could really kill Chu Xiao, with his appearance and ranking on the Dragon and Tiger list, Yan Huainan might even be eager to make him his son-in-law. Gong Sun Lu and the other 2 were considered to be somewhat famous warriors in Eastern Qi. Since they stood up and were ready to attack Chu Xiao, almost 100 warriors among the surrounding onlookers stood up, and were eager to give it a try. Among these warriors there were both inner and physical invulnerability warriors. As for warriors below the inner invulnerability realm, they did not dare to make a move. The warriors of the inner strong realm might still have the mentality of taking advantage of the situation, but the warriors of the innate realm did not even have the guts to do so. In a fight of this level, they could easily be killed if they were not careful. The aura of more than 100 people gathered together was extremely powerful. Even if Chu Xiao had gained the upper hand by showing off his strength, no matter how amazing the aura he created was, it would be useless in the face of more than 100 people. Sometimes people would follow blindly. If you were alone, you would be afraid, but if you had more than 100 companions around you, your fear would be distributed to these people, and you would become extremely brave. Standing at the back of the crowd, Mo Tianlin lowered his head and transmitted his voice to Xie Xiaolu. "Do we need help? After all, he is a friend of your friend." Xie Xiaolu said lightly, "A friend of a friend does not mean that he is a friend of mine. After all, we have only known each other for a few hours. I am not so righteous that I would risk my life for him. There are more than 100 people here, and it will be very tragic if I provoke them all. However, Brother Lu has mentioned him to me many times. With this important relationship, I will naturally not watch Chu Xiao be killed. There is no need to add flowers to brocade. If he really cannot hold on, I will lend a helping hand and save his life. What do you think? Mo Tianlin also smiled and said, just like you. Chapter 228. There were many righteous people in Jianghu, and there were also many realistic people. Xie Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin weren't righteous, but they weren't realistic people either. Xie Xiaolu was willing to become friends with Chu Xiu because of Lu Fengxian, while Mo Tianlin became friends with Chu Xiu because he was curious. In addition, he was a very amiable person who liked to make friends with others. They had only known Chu Xiu for half a day. Asking them to fight to the death for Chu Xiu was something they couldn't do. Just like what Xie Xiaolu said, the most they could do was to help Chu Xiu in his hour of need and save his life. That was already being extremely benevolent. This wasn't because they were indifferent, but because they lived in Jianghu. Most people could only do this. Just like Xie Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin, they had been good friends for many years. But even so, they had their own forces behind them, so they couldn't really fight to the death for each other. At most, they could only do their best. Moreover, the two of them wanted to see Chu Xiu's true strength. For martial artists like Xie Xiaolu and Mo Tianlin, those who could become friends with them were either people of similar status or stronger than them. Ordinary people didn't even have the qualifications to be friends with them. At this time, everyone was looking at Chu Xiu eagerly. The pressure even made Chu Xiu feel heavy. At the same time, he also felt that it was ridiculous. After stepping into Jianghu for so long, because he was familiar with the storyline, Chu Xiu was able to avoid many risks most of the time. Even when he faced the Heavensin branch leader last time, Chu Xiu used the storyline to lure the people of White Tiger Hall out of danger. But this time, it was purely an accident. He did not expect Yan Tingting to appear here, nor did he expect Yan Tingting's hatred for him to be so deep that she would not hesitate to pay the price of her own life to kill him. In the face of such a dangerous situation, Chu Xiu heaved a sigh of relief. The external pressure was heavy, but his heart was incomparably calm. It was a kind of calm that could be described as crazy. Chu Xiu from his previous life had always been the main character in the fusion of the memories of the two lives. However, in this life, Chu Xiu had been infected with a crazy and tyrannical personality in the Chu family's Nanshan mining area. It had been a long time since Chu Xiu had this kind of personality, but under this kind of external pressure, the tyrannical madness hidden in the deepest part of his soul was quietly released. Raising his head, Chu Xiu smiled at the people around him. Do you all want to exchange my life for your future? Bring it on. Everyone present suddenly frowned. If an ordinary person was surrounded by hundreds of martial artists of the same level, the only thing they would think of was to kill their way out and escape. Not like Chu Xiu, who dared to take the initiative to provoke them. This was simply courting death. However, the aftermath of Chu Xiu killing a three-flower realm martial artist with a single slash still lingered in the air. Although everyone knew that it was only because of Chu Xiu's explosive power, and not because of his true strength, who would dare to bet against him. The first person to attack could easily be used as cannon fodder to die, and then the people behind him could take advantage of it. Seeing that no one dared to move, the corner of Chu Xiu's mouth showed a crazy smile. Since none of you are coming, well, I'll go first. As soon as his voice fell, Chu Xiu took a step forward and pinched the inner binding seal. In an instant, his speed exploded to the extreme. The red sleeve blade in his hand was as red as blood. It had already devoured countless lives, and it was mixed with a dense aura of death. Chu Xiu's blood-refining divine shield was unleashed to the extreme. In an instant, the sky was filled with blood-red blade shadows, and they directly rushed toward the evil tiger Peng Zue. Although the power of this blade was not as strong as the power of the Avici Dao's three blades that Chu Xiu had directly burst out, it was still shocking enough. At the very least, Peng Zue, who bore the brunt of the attack, even wanted to curse. There were hundreds of people present, surrounding Chu Xiu. There were people in all directions. Why did Chu Xiu have to target him? So many people thought that he was easy to bully? However, under Chu Xiu's terrifyingly powerful blade aura, Peng Zue didn't have the time to complain at all. He roared furiously, and a pitch-black aura burst out from the giant axe in his hand. As the axe chopped down, a violent sonic boom immediately erupted. The aura even faintly condensed into the shape of a black tiger, appearing abnormally ferocious. Peng Zue was able to make a name for himself in the land of Eastern Qi, and even survive the strangulation of the Eastern Qi imperial court, which was enough to prove his strength. He hadn't learned any particularly profound martial skills, but he was exceptionally talented. His own strength and stellar energy were shockingly strong, and there were very few people in the same cultivation level who could block 3 of his axes. But at this time, facing Chu Xiu, his powerful axe with the roar of a black tiger was shattered inch by the blood-refined divine gang. The slender red sleeve blade collided with the giant axe in his hand, which was half the height of a person, but it directly chopped Peng Zue's giant axe into pieces. With a loud bang of gang qi, Peng Zue's body flew out directly. He instantly spat out blood, and a look of horror appeared in his eyes. What he was most proficient in was power. In the end, his power couldn't even withstand a single blow from Chu Xiu. And it was not over yet. Chu Xiu's figure rushed towards him again. At this time, Peng Zue also hurriedly shouted, "Don't just watch. Attack together. If you continue to hesitate, not to mention 100 people, even 1,000 people will be defeated by Chu Xiu one by one." Peng Zue's words did awaken many people. In a one-on-one fight, even a warrior with a little fame like Peng Zue could not withstand a few moves from Chu Xiu. If they ignored Chu Xiu and watched him attack, then sooner or later they would be defeated by Chu Xiu one by one. Therefore, more than a dozen physical invulnerability realm warriors beside Peng Zue hurriedly took action and blocked in front of Chu Xiu. Countless sword qi and gang qi broke out, and finally blocked Chu Xiu's blade momentum. The power of the blood-refined divine gang was indeed strong, and Chu Xiu's blade momentum was indeed amazing. But now more than a dozen people attacked together, and the pressure was evenly distributed, so they successfully blocked Chu Xiu's attack. But at this moment, a golden Buddha's light suddenly burst out. Under the great Vajrawheel seal, the incomparably fierce power directly broke through all obstacles, and several people in front of him were directly blown away while vomiting blood. Then it directly rushed towards Peng Zue. But just after Chu Xiu performed the great Vajrawheel seal, Zhu Wuhe appeared behind Chu Xiu unknowingly. On the folding fan in his hand, there were several bone-piercing nails with a trace of pitch-black gang qi attacking Chu Xiu's major acupoints. The pitch-black gang qi actually had the effect of corroding the opponent's gang qi. No matter how strong Chu Xiu's protective gang qi was, 2 bone-piercing nails directly hit 2 major acupoints on Chu Xiu's back. Seeing this, Zhu Wuhe's eyes showed a touch of joy. Similarly, he directly blasted a palm towards Chu Xiu's back. There was a trace of evil qi mixed in the palm force, which was obviously not a good method. On the other side, Peng Zue also breathed a sigh of relief when he saw this. Just now, he was still fantasizing about killing Chu Xiu and marrying Yan Tingting. Then he, a vulgar Jianghu person with a bandit background, could also become a disciple of a big sect. But Chu Xiu's saber made him recognize the cruel reality. If someone was killed by Zhu Wuhe, then so be it. At least he could still keep his life, right? But just when everyone thought that Chu Xiu would definitely be killed by Zhu Wuhe's sneak attack, Chu Xiu directly turned around without warning. The bone-piercing nails that hit 2 major acupoints in his body were directly blasted away by the internal force, and did not have the slightest effect at all. Zhu Wuhe met Chu Xiu's gaze and saw the ruthless madness without the slightest emotion, which made Zhu Wuhe's heart suddenly skip a beat. But the next moment, Chu Xiu's gaze had changed. It should be said that his eyes were once again covered by devil qi. In just a few minutes, Chu Xiu had already triggered the power of the Avicii Dao's 3 sabers twice. However, this time, Chu Xiu didn't use his saber. Instead, he welcomed Zhu Wuhe's palm strike with his great violet sun palm. This time, with Chu Xiu's devil qi as the catalyst, the violet sun devil flame seemed to have gained fuel as it burned intensely. When the palm strike landed, Zhu Wuhe immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire arm turned purple. The scorching violet sun devil flame burned within his body, causing him to almost scream out in pain. At this time, Chu Xiu's right hand was already holding the red sleeve saber, which made Zhu Wuhe retreat quickly. But unexpectedly, Chu Xiu did not attack Zhu Wuhe at all. but directly turned around and attacked Peng Zue again. No one could resist the 3 sabers of Avici Dao. When the red sleeve saber in Chu Xiu's hand, which was wrapped in devil qi, was lifted, the people in front of him either became corpses or were directly beheaded, cut in half, and became incomplete corpses. Looking at the oncoming devil saber, Peng Zue's eyes showed endless horror. Even when his stronghold was annihilated by the military experts of Eastern Qi, he had not been so close to death. With a loud shout, Gang Qi burst out of Peng Zue's body, and a punch fell. The black tiger fist turned into a 1-meter-long Gang Qi phantom, trying to stop Chu Xiu, but the result was that under the terrible devil Qi, it was shattered. When he came to his senses, he could not speak, because at this time, Peng Zue had already seen his headless corpse. Surrounded by the monstrous devil Qi, Chu Xiu stood with the saber under the gaze of countless people, and at his feet was Peng Zue's headless corpse. Looking at Zhu Wuhe, Chu Xiu's eyes were wrapped in devil Qi, and the people could not see his eyes, but could see a trace of a crazy smile at the corner of his mouth. Pointing to Zhu Wuhe, Chu Xiu said in a voice without the slightest emotion, "This is the first, and you are the second." Hearing this, Zhu Wuhe, who was expelling the purple sun devil flame, suddenly shivered, and shouted in his heart, "Madman!" Chapter 229. From Zhu Wuhe's point of view, Chu Xiu was a madman. Chu Xiu's palm just now had already seriously injured him. Normally speaking, Chu Xiu should have killed him first, and then Peng Zue. However, Chu Xiu gave up on what was close at hand and sought what was far away, insisting on killing Peng Zue first, and now pointing at him to be the second. Chu Xiu's intentions were very clear. No matter how many people there were here, as long as they were targeted by him, no one would be able to leave alive. This was a kind of crazy attitude, not caring about gains and losses, only wanting to kill. At this time, Zhu Wuhe, who was listed as the second target by Chu Xiu, looked at Chu Xiu's eyes that were covered by demonic energy, and suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. The martial artists who did not participate in this matter, and the spectators all revealed a look of surprise. Whether it was Chu Xiu's crazy attitude or his ability to recklessly kill his opponents in the midst of 100 people, they all left a very deep impression on them. Mo Tianlin's complexion was dignified as he looked at Xie Xiaolu and said, "If you were Chu Xiu, would you be able to do this?" After being silent for a long time, Xie Xiaolu's eyes revealed a touch of complexity, and he said, "Do fart." At this time, shouldn't a normal person choose to kill his way out? This guy actually took the initiative to fight those people. He's simply a madman. Mo Tianlin's eyes revealed a touch of surprise, and he said, "What's wrong with being a madman?" A senior of my Mo family once said, "There are no madmen in this world, only the strong and the weak. If you don't go crazy, you won't survive." When a madman stands at the peak, he is no longer a madman, but a strong person that everyone worships. Now I am more and more interested in this Chu Xiu. 1 against 100, if he doesn't die, this God weapon convention will be the place where he will make a name for himself. As a disciple of an aristocratic family, it was inevitable that there would be some utilitarianism in making friends. Mo Tianlin knew this, but he did not reject it. Based on the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed, he was ready to lend a helping hand. When Daoist Xiancheng saw Chu Xiu's reaction, he suddenly frowned and mumbled, taking the initiative to draw the inner demon into his body. Was he crazy? No, this inner demon has always existed in his body. He is just releasing it naturally. This person was born with a demonic nature in his body. The sequelae of transmigration caused Chu Xiu to hide 2 personalities in his body. Simply put, his condition was the legendary schizophrenia. From Daoist Xiancheng's point of view, Chu Xiu was a person with a hidden demonic nature. If he were to enter the demonic path, he would not be an elite on the Longhu list, but a ferocious new talent in the demonic path. The demonic path was not scary. What was scary was that some people in the demonic path did not even think of themselves as such. From Daoist Xiancheng's point of view, Chu Xiu was such a person. The demonic nature in his body did not reject him at all. That was why he could use the secret technique to enter the demonic path twice in a row, and still control the power in his body, preventing it from backfiring. Daoist Xianqing shook his head. If this person did not die, he might become a great demon who would bring disaster to the world in the future. However, he could not stop him. Daoist Xianqing had already sworn that he would never fight again in this life, so this matter was not something he could interfere with. With a sigh, Daoist Xianqing turned around and said to the few little Taoist children beside him, "Let's go. It's time for us to move." As he spoke, he waved his hand and led the few little Taoist children into the Taoist temple. However, the strange thing was that some of the warriors who were very close to Daoist Xianqing did not notice his actions at all. They did not even notice that Daoist Xianqing had disappeared. At this moment, Chu Xiu flashed a sinister smile at Zhu Wuhe before charging straight at him. Seeing this, Zhu Wuhe's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly retreated and shouted, "Guards! Everyone attack together. Don't let Chu Xiu defeat us one by one." When the warriors around heard Zhu Wuhe's shout, not only did they not attack, but they also avoided Chu Xiu. No one dared to stop him. It was not that they were idiots who did not know the principle of defeating them one by one, but they did not want to die. Everyone could see that Chu Xiu was obviously not in the right state of mind. He would kill anyone he targeted and kill anyone who stood in his way, just like how he killed Peng Zue just now. Now that he had targeted Zhu Wuhe, it proved that they were safe for the time being. As for how long Zhu Wuhe could last, it was none of their business. People always wanted to get lucky. Now that Chu Xiu was in the limelight, no one wanted to be the first to rush to their deaths. Anyway, as long as Chu Xiu did not target them, they would not make the first move. Under Chu Xiu's extremely violent saber momentum, Zhu Wuhe was seriously injured by the saber aura after a few moves. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This kind of gap in strength could not be made up for by any martial arts skill. At this time, Gongsun Lu, who was watching the battle from the side, frowned. He was insidious and cunning, and was best at currying favor. Otherwise, he would not have a place on the Longhu list. Originally, with Gongsun Lu's character, he was ready to take advantage of the situation at the last moment. However, it was obvious that he was not the only one who thought so. 1 against 100, this was simply a fantasy. The opponent would almost certainly die. But now, although Chu Xiu was fighting 1 against 100, the 100 people he was fighting had their own thoughts. 100 people had 100 thoughts. If this continued, no one would be able to kill Chu Xiu. Therefore, Gongsun Lu could not calm down at this time. He directly stood up and shouted, "Everyone, if you continue to hold back, I am afraid that you will be defeated by Chu Xiu one by one. At that time, no one will be able to kill Chu Xiu. If you trust me, then listen to my command." More than 10 warriors who have practiced horizontal martial arts will stand up to block Chu Xiu. Warriors who are good at using hidden weapons, long arrows, and other weapons will attack from a distance. The rest of the warriors will coordinate with each other. Only then will we be able to kill this Chu Xiu. With that, Gongsun Lu pulled out the 2 precious weapons on his back, one red and one black, and rushed towards Chu Xiu. People tend to follow blindly. If there was no one to go first, then no one else would. Although Gongsun Lu's character was not very good, he was still famous and strong. Therefore, as soon as he spoke, many warriors were willing to listen to his command. They formed a formation and attacked Chu Xiu together. Under Gongsun Lu's lead, more than 10 cultivators who cultivated in body tempering cultivation techniques rushed forward. They burst forth with astral energy to block Chu Xiu's attack. With a series of explosions of astral energy, more than 10 people attacked together. Only then did they barely manage to block Chu Xiu's powerful saber attack. At the same time, there was a sound of air breaking. In the distance, some hidden weapons attacked Chu Xiu. Among them were several arrows with sharp gang qi. There were many warriors who used hidden weapons in the Jianghu, but there were only a few who used bows and arrows. Most of them were warriors who came from the imperial court, and were used to using bows and arrows as weapons. The powerful bows and arrows and the sinister hidden weapons attacked together. Chu Xiu frowned. His blood-refined divine power burst out, cutting down the arrows one by one. As for the remaining hidden weapons, he also burst out his gang qi to block them. In any case, with the great acupoint shifting technique, Even if Chu Xiu was hit by the hidden weapons, as long as there was no poison on them, Chu Xiu was not afraid at all. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Gong Sun Lu also led his men to attack. The two swords in Gong Sun Lu's hands were both precious weapons. One carried a scorching hot Gang Qi, while the other carried a sinister Qi. However, Gong Sun Lu was able to use two different types of stellar energy and two different types of sword techniques very naturally. One yin and one yang, bringing with them two auras, slashed towards Chu Xiu. The other warriors also surged their Gang Qi and attacked Chu Xiu. The combined attack of more than a dozen people was very powerful. If it was anyone else, they would have been torn to pieces by this powerful Gang Qi. But at this moment, Chu Xiu formed a seal with both hands. He mobilized all the Gang Qi around him, and the aura around him suddenly became very stable, unmoving like a mountain. Formula of Lin Duguyin. With a loud bang, endless Gang Qi exploded. Chu Xiu's figure quickly retreated, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Although Chu Xiu had once used Duguyin to block the divine black spatial claw from the heavenly Simbranch leader, now that there were more than a dozen people attacking together, Duguyin's defensive Gang Qi attack was more prominent. The recoil of his own power was still borne by Chu Xiu. So after using Duguyin to block the attack, Chu Xiu's internal organs were shaken, and he suffered minor injuries. He formed the inner lion seal. While suppressing his internal injuries, Chu Xiu also suppressed the devil qi drawn by the three blades of Avicii. He had drawn the devil qi into his body twice in a row without directly suppressing the recoil. His body was starting to feel a little overwhelmed. At this time, when Gong Sun Lu and the others saw that Chu Xiu had been beaten back by them, they couldn't help but show excitement in their eyes. Previously, Chu Xiu was so strong that he could kill anyone who stood in his way. If Buddha stood in his way, he would kill Buddha. Everyone was terrified. But now Chu Xiu was seriously injured under their siege. This proved that Chu Xiu was not unbeatable. They still had a chance. So this time they didn't need Gong Sun Lu's command. They directly swarmed forward and attacked Chu Xiu. Gong Sun Lu sneered when he saw this. He was not in a hurry. When these people had almost exhausted Chu Xiu's strength, it would be the best time for him to make his move. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Chu Xiu looked at the people rushing towards him and smiled. "You can't wait to die? Well, I'll fulfill your wish." Before his voice died away, Chu Xiu's hand had already formed a fist seal. When this seal fell, the people around him felt that their bodies were sealed in the surrounding space. The Gang Qi imprisoned their bodies, like a big net, making it impossible for them to break free. Formation word formula Wisdom Fist Seal. Main space sealed. Nets in all directions. Heaven and earth are useless. Chu Xiu's figure moved and appeared in front of a martial artist. At the moment when the martial artist was imprisoned by the Gang Qi, he gently twisted his hand, and the martial artist's head was abruptly removed. Blood gushed out like a fountain. He turned around and unsheathed the red sleeve blade. The blood god gang erupted. The two martial artists in front of Chu Xiu were directly cut in half at the waist, letting out miserable screams. Within the range of the Wisdom Fist seal, Chu Xiu was like a poisonous spider that had laid an inescapable net, cold-blooded harvesting everyone's lives. Chapter 230. Chu Xiu was already very familiar with the first 6 seals of the fast and slow 9 words formula, but Chu Xiu had never used the last 3 seals. It was not that Chu Xiu did not want to use them, but the fast and slow 9 words formula itself was a kind of martial arts technique that consumed a lot of internal energy. The last few seals consumed too much internal energy, and they were all instantaneous bursts. If they were used rashly, it would cause great pressure on Chu Xiu's meridians, and if he was not careful, it would cause a backlash. At this moment, Chu Xiu could not care less about the backlash. He had mobilized all the Gang Qi in his body to the maximum. In his body, the glazed golden silk goo was attached to his heart, beating with the rhythm of Chu Xiu's heartbeat. Traces of golden power seeped into Chu Xiu's meridians. This was the power that belonged to the glazed golden silk goo. There was a reason why the glazed golden silk goo could be called a treasure in the past. Ordinary goo worms were evil and ruthless, belonging to the insidious category. However, the glazed golden silk goo was not that kind of insidious goo worm. Although it relied on the power of Chu Xiu's blood to grow and survive, at this critical moment, the glazed golden silk goo could also release its own power to complement Chu Xiu. The goo worm was attached to Chu Xiu's heart. This way, the two of them were symbiotic, and it was not a one-sided demand. At this time, under the powerful power of Chu Xiu's wisdom fist seal that sealed the void, the first dozen warriors who attacked were all slaughtered by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's figure was also quickly charging towards Zhu Wuhe. Wherever he passed, no one dared to stop him. Previously, when they saw Chu Xiu vomiting blood from his injuries, they all thought that Chu Xiu was already in a desperate situation and had exhausted his limited abilities. Who would have thought that his sudden burst of power would take away more than a dozen lives? At this moment, everyone's heart was a little uncertain. Where exactly was Chu Xiu's limit? Although he seemed to have consumed a lot of energy, who dared to say that Chu Xiu did not have the strength to do it again? Gong Sunlu was still shouting at the side. He wanted to gather people to stop Chu Xiu again, but this time, there was no one to deal with him. Looking at Chu Xiu's approaching figure, Zhu Wuhe covered his wound and shouted in horror, "Don't kill me! I quit." He was the only hope of the Zhu family, the only person qualified to step into the upper class of Jianghu. Even if he couldn't marry Yan Tingting, he had other ways to make a name for himself in the land of Eastern Qi. Why should he get involved in this mess? At this time, Zhu Wuhe already regretted, but unfortunately, Chu Xiu would not give him the chance to regret. The crimson shadow of the knife shone in front of him. Even though the red sleeve knife had taken the lives of more than 10 people, there was still not a trace of blood on it. However, there was a strong smell of blood on the knife, which made people pale. Zhu Wuhe roared. Ignoring his own injury, he wanted to burst out all the gang qi in his body to resist. But before he could do anything, Chu Xiu's figure had already swept past him. The crimson knife flashed, and Chu Xiu had already taken Zhu Wuhe's head. Panting, Chu Xiu pointed at Gong Sunlu and said in an extremely calm tone, "You are the third." When Chu Xiu looked at him with a calm but extremely crazy look, Gong Sunlu suddenly shivered, and a chill rushed from the bottom of his heart to the top of his head. He looked around subconsciously. The other warriors were no longer as excited as before, nor were they still fantasizing about killing Chu Xiu, marrying Yan Tingting, becoming the heir of the Divine Force sect, and reaching the peak of their lives. Gong Sunlu could only see fear in their eyes, endless fear. They had seen people who had killed more people than Chu Xiu, but Chu Xiu's method of killing people one by one, coupled with his terrifying strength that seemed to be able to destroy everything, was so strong that it made them despair. As long as it was the person Chu Xiu wanted to kill, he could not escape, and they could not stop him. Otherwise, whoever stood in his way would die. It could be said that God would kill God, Buddha would kill Buddha. Under such terrifying strength, their counterattack seemed so powerless. Even now, no one dared to take the initiative to step forward. If this went on, after Chu Xiu killed Gong Sunlu, who would be next? Themselves or others? Although the probability was only a few out of 10, as long as they were targeted by Chu Xiu, the death rate was 100%. Thinking of this, some people even retreated from the crowd in a panic and fled. Marrying a beauty like Yan Tingting was indeed very tempting, and becoming the heir of the Divine Force sect was even more tempting. Everyone understood the principle of seeking wealth amidst danger. But the problem was that facing Chu Xiu, it was no longer seeking wealth amidst danger, it was simply seeking wealth amidst death. Therefore, some of the timid people were scared by Chu Xiu and immediately fled the place after losing their greed. People tended to follow blindly, just like how they had participated in the siege against Chu Xiu. Clearly, when one person escaped, the others also wanted to escape. From one person, it became a few, and finally, it became a dozen, a few dozens. Seeing Chu Xiu's figure approaching, Gong Sunlu felt a little guilty. He knew his own strength. The other idiots were scared by Chu Xiu and did not even dare to fight. How could he fight when he was the only one left? Without saying a word, Gong Sunlu directly turned around and fled. And his speed was even faster than the others. Looking at Gong Sunlu's fleeing figure, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a hint of coldness. In fact, his current state was not too bad. Although Chu Xiu was still killing, whether it was drawing demonic energy into his body twice, or using the wisdom fist seal that he had not fully grasped, Chu Xiu's backlash was very large. If not for the glass golden thread's goose power to feed back to Chu Xiu probably would not have lasted until now. But now Chu Xiu's will was still in an extreme state of madness. Since he said he would kill Gongsun Lu, then he must die. So at this moment, Chu Xiu directly formed the internal binding seal, and his figure broke through the wind. Between heaven and earth, he could move unhindered. The speed that the internal binding seal could unleash could be said to be the limit for short distances. Gongsun Lu did not run far before he felt a whistling gust of wind behind him. At the same time, he also felt the powerful aura qi that was stained with endless demonic energy descending on him. Gongsun Lu roared angrily, and the two swords in his hands danced. In an instant, the crimson longsword danced with flames, and the longsword with the evil aura burst out a aura qi that was not demonic energy, but a decaying aura. It fused with the flames. In an instant, the fierce and explosive sword aura seemed to be ignited with ghost fire, and a strange and scorching aura burst out, enveloping Chu Xiu. This underworld flaming sword of his was something he had figured out himself, and he had condensed two different sword moves together, causing its might to explode out several times. A rogue cultivator like him did not have a powerful inheritance, so he could only rely on this alternative method to improve the power of his martial arts. The strength of the underworld fire sword's aura could only be said to be ordinary, but it contained an extremely strong corrosive power. It actually corroded Chu Xiu's blood-refined divine aura completely. However, before he could catch his breath, he saw a golden Buddha's light burst out in front of him. The Vajra glared, suppressing the world and subduing the demon. The great Vajra will seal. With a loud bang, the long sword in Gongsun Lu's hand was directly knocked away. Even the web between his thumb and index finger was cracked by Chu Xiu's great Vajra will seal, and blood flowed out. Seeing Chu Xiu appear in front of him, Gongsun Lu no longer had time to feel fear. He directly reached into his arms, wanting to take something. However, before he could do anything, Chu Xiu quickly formed a seal with his hand. As he tapped the seal with his fingers, there was a thunderous explosion. Fighting formula: Outer Lion Seal. The Outer Lion Seal, which was comparable to the Great Light Temple's 9 transformation lion roar, was displayed. The thunderous explosion seemed to ring in Gongsun Lu's ears, and it immediately stunned him. He even started bleeding from his orifices. When Gongsun Lu regained consciousness again, a dazzling golden fist seal appeared in front of him. It was another great Vajra will seal. Bang! There was a crisp explosion, and the blood mist in front of Chu Xiu dissipated. As Gongsun Lu's headless body fell to the ground, there was suddenly a dead silence. Only Chu Xiu's deep breathing could be heard. Those who didn't participate in this battle all stared at Chu Xiu with their mouths agape. 1 against 100? This was an almost impossible task, but Chu Xiu had actually done it. The God Weapon Convention had yet to begin, but they were almost certain that after this matter, Chu Xiu's ranking on the Longhu leaderboard would definitely rise by a few more places. Not to mention the top 15, it was even possible for him to enter the top 10. Mo Tianlin looked at Chu Xiu, and after a long while, he let out an unclear sigh. He secretly transmitted his voice to Xie Xiaolu, who was beside him. What did I say? Only experts and madmen can do something like this. Just now, you said that Chu Xiu is a madman, but now in the eyes of others he is an expert. Xie Xiaolu nodded with a complicated look in his eyes. He was also a proud person, and it was very difficult for ordinary martial artists of the same generation to convince him. In recent years, the only person who could convince him was Marquis Wen Lu Fengxian. But now seeing Chu Xiu, he believed in Lu Fengxian's judgment of people. For Lu Fengxian to praise him so much, he was indeed not an ordinary person. If it were them in that situation just now, the only way out would be to fight a bloody path. Being able to escape in such a sorry state would already be considered lucky. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, did the exact opposite. He went on a killing spree as if he had gone mad, causing everyone to tremble in fear. He killed until no one dared to come and kill him. Don't look at how Chu Xiu looked like he was about to run out of strength. But based on Chu Xiu's performance just now, who could be sure that he did not have the strength to fight anymore? The terrifying thing about Chu Xiu was that others could not see through him at all. If anyone wanted to take advantage of him, they could only test him with their life. Chapter 231. In this battle, Chu Xiu had completely stabilized the situation by himself. However, at this moment Bai Wuji, who was in the rear, had a strange look in his eyes. The others had been scared stiff by Chu Xiu. Even if they knew that they could marry Yan Tingting and become Yan Huainan's son-in-law by killing Chu Xiu, they still didn't dare to make a move. However, when Bai Wuji saw that Chu Xiu's aura had become sluggish and was no longer as powerful as before, he felt a little restless. In fact, Bai Wuji didn't have any interest in Yan Tingting. He was also a warrior from the Northern Yan clan, so he naturally knew what kind of person she was. A strong man like him naturally didn't like a crafty and unruly woman like Yan Tingting. Moreover, in his opinion, this woman was completely crazy. She actually used herself and the divine martial sect as a reward to hire someone to kill Chu Xiu. If Yan Huainan knew about this, he would be furious. Moreover, as the most outstanding disciple of this generation in the northern floating snow city, he didn't care about the position of the successor of the divine martial sect. The northern floating snow city was much stronger than the divine martial sect. Frankly speaking, the grudge between Bai Wuji and Chu Xiu was just a fight for fame and fortune. Some people didn't care about fame and fortune, but some people couldn't let it go, and Bai Wuji was one of them. When he first met Chu Xiu was just a penniless rogue cultivator. Bai Wuji didn't care even if he took away the treasure in Liuyang Mountain in front of him. However, in less than 2 years, Chu Xiu had completely surpassed him. Sooner or later, these things would be dug out by others. At that time, Bai Wuji would easily become a stepping stone for Chu Xiu's achievements on the Longhu list. However, Bai Wuji had no choice but to admit that just based on the might Chu Xiu displayed now, if they were to fight one-on-one, he wouldn't be a match for him. Even if he used the secret arts of the Driftsnow city, he didn't have much confidence in defeating Chu Xiu. However, Bai Wuji had never been a pedantic person. He had to be fair when fighting. It wasn't like he hadn't hit someone when they were down before. Therefore, after seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Bai Wuji's eyes suddenly revealed a trace of killing intent. Finally, he made up his mind and said to Feng Huai and the other Northern Yan warriors, "Later, all of you attack Chu Xiu with me." Hearing Bai Wuji's words, Feng Huai was startled and quickly said, "Brother Bai, the God Weapon Conference is coming, and you will have plenty of time. Why are you in such a hurry?" If Bai Wuji wanted to attack Chu Xiu, that was Bai Wuji's business. They didn't want to get involved. If Chu Xiu was just an ordinary rogue cultivator, it would have been fine. After all, when they attacked him, they could at least curry favor with Bai Wuji, the young lord of the floating snow city. But the problem was that Chu Xiu was not an ordinary cultivator. He was the patrol of the Guanzhong torture room, representing the Guanzhong torture room to participate in the God Weapon Conference. Moreover, the patrol was the backbone of the Guanzhong torture room. They couldn't afford to lose him. If they hit Chu Xiu while he was down and made a move against him, the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall would definitely demand an explanation from them if they were not cowards. Although the Guanzhong Torture Hall was located in the center of the 3 countries, so they had always been very low-key and cautious, in reality, with the power of the Guanzhong Torture Hall, it was still very easy for them to deal with forces of their level. They did not want to be involved in this mess. Bai Wuji said coldly, "I know what you are afraid of. You are afraid of the Guanzhong torture room. Don't worry, I will take responsibility for this. If the Guanzhong torture room wants to cause trouble, they can come to the northern floating snow city." Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, Bai Wuji said coldly, "What? My words don't work, or have you been frightened by Chu Xiu and don't dare to attack?" Feng Huai and the others glanced at each other and revealed helpless expressions. Bai Wuji had already started to threaten them. How could they not attack? If they attacked, they might offend the Guanzhong torture room, but if they didn't, they would definitely offend the northern floating snow city. Unless they didn't want to live in the northern Yan anymore, the northern floating snow city was something they couldn't afford to offend. Just as they were about to attack, Mo Tianlin and Xie Xiaolu noticed the commotion and looked at each other. They directly stood in front of Bai Wuji and the others. Chu Xiu's strength had proven that he could be their friend, so Mo Tianlin and Xie Xiaolu naturally had to show their sincerity. Looking at the two people in front of him, Bai Wuji said coldly, Mo Tianlin, Xie Xiaolu, you two don't know Chu Xiu, do you? You've only known him for a day, and you want to stop me for him? Mo Tianlin said indifferently. We hit it off with Brother Chu the moment we met. Can't we? Bai Wuji, you're too materialistic. Is the ranking on the Longhu leaderboard really that important? If you want to make a move, wait until the God Weapon Conference. But now that Brother Chu has exhausted himself, you'll have to go through us first if you want to add insult to injury. You. Bai Wuji's eyes showed a hint of coldness. Just as he clenched the spear in his hand, he saw Xie Xiaolu silently take off the floating feather saber on his back. The top 20 on the Longhu leaderboard was a threshold, and the top 10 was another. Xie Xiaolu was now ranked 12th on the Longhu leaderboard. He was the most capable of making it to the top 10. When he stepped into the three-flower realm, he would most likely have the strength to make it to the top 10. Bai Wuji knew about Xie Xiaolu's reputation in the land of West Chu. He didn't even have the confidence to face Xie Xiaolu alone, let alone Mo Tianlin. Looking at the two of them, Bai Wuji said coldly, very well. I'll remember this. We'll see the results during the God Weapon Conference. With that, Bai Wuji reluctantly put away his spear and retreated. Meanwhile, in the field, Chu Xiu, who had just recovered some of his inner force, walked toward Yan Tingting with murderous intent in his eyes. Seeing Chu Xiu's actions, everyone's heart suddenly skipped a beat. Was Chu Xiu really going to kill Yan Tingting? Even Mo Tianlin was a little uncertain. He murmured, does Chu Xiu really dare to make a move? Isn't he afraid that Yan Huainan will go crazy if he kills Yan Tingting? Most warriors who came from big families like Mo Tianlin would follow the principle of leaving a way out for others in case they met again in the future. Usually they wouldn't go to such extremes. But now Chu Xiu's behavior was basically going to go to such extremes. Even if Yan Tingting was Yan Huainan's daughter, he would still kill her. Xie Xiaolu said matter-of-factly, this woman is so good at causing trouble. If we don't kill her now, are we going to keep her alive for the new year? If I were Chu Xiu, I would also kill her. Mo Tianlin looked at Xie Xiaolu speechlessly. Xie Xiaolu's master was Chen Qingdi, who was famous for being domineering. Of course, Xie Xiaolu would dare to say such words with him backing him up. However, Chu Xiu didn't have such a master, and Guan Xiyu was only his superior. If he really angered Yan Huainan, it was unknown whether Guan Xiyu would be able to help Chu Xiu deal with all of this. Actually, Chu Xiu wasn't thinking so much. He wasn't an indecisive person to begin with. In addition, the crazy and tyrannical side of his mind had the upper hand. So Chu Xiu's thinking was very simple. If you want to kill me, I'll kill you. I don't care who you are or what the consequences are. The divine martial sect's Xiantian realm warriors revealed endless fear in their eyes. At this moment, they couldn't care less about their superiors. They immediately grabbed Yan Tingting and fled. At this moment, Yan Tingting's eyes were no longer filled with hatred. There was only fear. Previously, she only had hatred for Chu Xiu because she thought she could kill Chu Xiu. But in the end, she realized that even though she had used all her methods, she was still extremely weak in front of Chu Xiu. When Chu Xiu had destroyed all her methods, and she had even started to face the threat of death, Yan Tingting finally knew what fear was. She knew what the fear of death was. As Yan Huainan's daughter, and the young mistress of the divine martial sect, who in the entire northern Yan land didn't know about her, Yan Huainan didn't expect his daughter to become stronger, so he had no intention of training her. Every time he went out, he would bring a group of divine martial sect's disciples with him as guards. She had never encountered any danger since she was young. It was only now that Yan Tingting knew what the fear of death was. In the face of death, her love for Yu Luchuan was nothing. Her hatred for Chu Xiu had already vanished and turned into fear. So when the divine martial sect's disciples pulled her away, Yan Tingting didn't refuse. Instead, she took the initiative to escape with them. But it was already too late. Although there was some distance between them, their speed was too slow. Moreover, they were carrying Yen Tingting, who was a burden. Even if Chu Xiu didn't use the internal binding seal, they wouldn't be able to escape with a few Xiantian realm warriors. Yen Tingting took a step forward, and the sound of Gang Qi gradually came. Seeing that Chu Xiu was getting closer and closer to them, she couldn't help but shout in fear. "Don't kill me. I won't come back for revenge." Yen Tingting's shout was absolutely sincere. Today, Chu Xiu had left a deep fear in her heart. At least, before she could overcome this fear, she really didn't dare to come back for revenge against Chu Xiu. However, at this time, Chu Xiu acted as if he didn't hear her words. The red sleeve blade in his hand was already unsheathed, and a crimson Gang Qi slashed across the sky. The blood-refined God Gang slashed down with a loud bang without any mercy. The divine martial sex warriors and Yen Tingting's eyes were filled with despair. But at this time, the sound of angry waves suddenly came. A water spout suddenly rose from the mirror lake and blocked in front of Yen Tingting like an arrow. The water spout exploded with a loud bang, shattering Chu Xiu's blood-refined God Gang. Everyone looked at Mirror Lake and saw a small boat speeding towards them. There was no one rowing the boat. It was driven by stellar energy, but it was as fast as an arrow leaving the bow. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.